Chapter 55. Yun Yen Pavilion, Tea House. After the rooster crowed, the old man still didn't dare to go back. It wasn't until noon, when the sun was high in the sky, that he walked back nervously. However, when he returned to Clearwater Bay, he saw an unbelievable scene. He saw the two water ghosts, the young man who passed by that day, and the Taoist priest working together to steal all his grapes. After a few days, the young storyteller finally returned. Everyone heard the ending of the story of the water ghost and the old man as they wished. Although many people were shocked by the sudden turn of events and slammed the table in anger, they had no choice but to admit that this unheard-of plot was much more exciting than listening to other storytellers. This young storyteller would tell 3 to 5 stories a day. When he reached the last story, in order to keep the guests, he would purposely stop at the most exciting part. Although everyone was angry, they knew that this was the storyteller's way of keeping the guests. At most, they would curse a few words, but they wouldn't rush up the stage to beat the storyteller up. In Yuntai County, there was a county magistrate named Li. His family was very rich and raised 7 beautiful concubines. His treasures were piled up like a mountain. One day, County Magistrate Li suddenly died. A Taoist priest came to his house and said that he could bring him back to life. The Taoist priest gave County Magistrate Li's old servant a paper bag and warned him to look at it only when the situation was critical. After that, the Taoist priest disappeared. When the old servant returned home, he couldn't help but open the paper bag and secretly look at its contents. What was written on the paper was, "If you want to know what was written on the paper, tomorrow at the same time. Be there or be square." The gripping story, the familiar, "If you want to know what will happen in the future, wait for the next episode." The guests below the stage angrily shouted a few times, "Bastard, this again, I'll break your legs," and so on. Then they scattered while cursing. Li Mu slipped out of Yunyan Pavilion through the back door. He estimated that at this speed, he would be able to gather all the anger he needed to condense the second soul in 10 days and half a month. If he had enough courage to refine the anger, he would be able to refine the second soul immediately. He did not know if the tiger demon was bold enough. If it was not, he would have to find other opportunities. Old Wang's theory of survival of the fittest was cruel, but it was a realistic law of survival. Li Mu would not kill demons and take their souls for the sake of cultivation, but if the evil demons were executed on the spot, he would not waste his courage. It was not that there were no shortcuts on the road of cultivation, but one had to stick to one's heart and bottom line. Li Mu was always using Li Qing's words to ask himself. He went to the duty room and saw Zhang Shan, Li Si, and old Wang eating watermelon around the table. Zhang Shan looked up and asked in surprise, "Li Mu, why did you come to the yamen instead of recuperating?" Li Mu picked up a slice of watermelon and said, "The boss gave me a fulu for treatment. I'm almost healed." Zhang Shan shook his head and said, "You've just recovered and you're already here. You're really getting more and more diligent." Old Wang asked Li Mu while eating the watermelon, "Where did you learn that glutinous rice can restrain zombies?" "I've looked through hundreds of books, but I couldn't find any record of it." Li Mu said, "A Taoist priest told me when I was young. It might be his secret method." "It's also possible." Old Wang threw away the watermelon peel and said, "You have to write this down in the Encyclopedia of Monsters in the 10 continents. Later on, when people encounter zombies, they will have one more way to defend themselves." He wiped his mouth and asked, "By the way, did you take the zombies' courage?" Li Mu was stunned for a moment and asked, "Zombies also have courage?" "Zombies have been dead for so long that their spirits have long been scattered." "Of course not." Old Wang shook his head and said, "But you don't think that zombies only suck human blood when they harm people, do you?" Old Wang read a lot of books and his knowledge was much broader than Li Mu's. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What else?" Old Wang picked up another slice of watermelon and said, "White zombies and black zombies only suck human blood. They just became zombies not long ago and can only suck human blood. But jumping zombies are different. Not only can they absorb the moonlight to cultivate, but they can also absorb the human spirit when they suck blood. A jumping zombie with decades of cultivation has accumulated a lot of people's courage in its body. It's much more useful than monsters," Li Mu said regretfully, Why didn't you say so earlier? Old Wang shrugged. You didn't ask earlier. Li Mu really didn't know this. If he had known earlier, he would have asked Han Zhe to burn the zombie later. But on second thought, old landlord Zhang was different from those jumping zombies with decades of cultivation. He had died less than half a month ago and had only bitten one person and 2 sheep. There shouldn't be much courage left in his body. Thinking of this, he didn't feel so regretful. It's not too late to know now. Old Wang finished the watermelon quickly and said, the zombie disaster in Zhou County hasn't been solved yet. If you go to Zhou County now, you should be able to absorb a lot of courage. Many cultivators in Beijing have gone to Zhou County. In addition to helping to quell the zombie disaster, they should also have the same idea. Although the courage of the zombies in Zhou County was very attractive to Li Mu could still weigh his own weight. A jumping zombie almost killed him. Zhou County even had flying zombies. Wasn't it better to follow Li Qing and kill a few evil monsters? There was no need to take such a big risk just to take a shortcut. However, old Wang reminded him that there was nothing wrong with reading more books. If Li Mu was as knowledgeable as old Wang, he wouldn't have wasted so many opportunities. He looked at old Wang and said, what books have you been reading recently? Recommend a few to me. Old Wang thought for a moment and said, Picking Flowers, A Curtain of Spring Dreams, Beautiful Empress of 10,000 Demons, and Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. It was just published yesterday. It really opened my eyes. There are people and ghosts, people and demons, people and ghosts and demons. There are female ghosts, snake demons, and even dragons. I have to admit that the person who wrote this book is really a genius. When Zhang Shan heard this, he immediately became spirited and said, Old Wang, when you finish reading these books, lend them to me. Picking Flowers, Spring Dreams, Beautiful Empress didn't sound like a serious book. How could it be compared with Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio? One was a pure erotic novel, while the other had depth and connotation. It either exposed the darkness of feudal rule or resisted the shackles of feudal etiquette. Through the love between demons and humans, the author expressed the author's pursuit of ideal love. A serious person would see a breakthrough in feudal etiquette, but an old man like Old Wang would see a life and death friend, a hero, and a son-in-law. People who walked different paths couldn't make plans together. Li Mu waved his hand and said, Lend me the records of demons in the 10 continents for 2 days. I'll return it to you after I finish reading it. On the day the first volume of Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio was published, Lu Hanyan told Li Mu that this book used to be a forbidden book in ancient times. But here, Li Mu wasn't worried. Firstly, the feudal etiquette here didn't bind people so deeply. Secondly, Li Mu didn't use any of the chapters that might involve political sensitivities. The more explicit descriptions in the original work were also deleted by Li Mu. The Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio that he gave to the bookstore, other than some mysterious stories, the main theme was love. For example, Shao Qian, Ying Ning, and Lianqing were full of innocent hearts, the true meaning of love, and the praise of true love. Every time Wan Wan listened to Li Mu's narration, her eyes would be filled with tears. Wan Wan was Li Mu's first reader. Lu Hanyan wouldn't let him go if he wanted to do something inappropriate in the book and lead the innocent girl astray. Li Mu was still on sick leave. He just came to the county office to see if there was a chance to collect emotions. Since there wasn't, he didn't plan to talk to Old Wang and the others about their life and death friendship. Before leaving, Li Mu said to Old Wang, Next time, if something like this happens again, remember to tell me in advance. Even Li Qing didn't know about the matter of extracting the zombie's courage. Old Wang had lived long enough and was very knowledgeable. He could totally act as his cultivation consultant. Li Mu had to remind him so that he wouldn't always give advice after the fact. After leaving the county office, Li Mu went straight home. He had been recuperating at home for the past few days. Although he had found out about the person Sue he asked him to find out, he didn't have the chance to tell her. After returning home, Li Mu first cooked noodles for him and Wan Wan. After lunch, he personally cooked a few dishes and put them in a lunchbox. When he went out and passed by Yunyan Pavilion, he picked up a few novels and left the city in the direction of Clearwater Bay. Chapter 56. At the Bay of Clearwater, in a small house by the water covered by illusion. He glanced at Li Mu and said slowly, "You said you would come to see me when you have time. You haven't come for so long. I thought you had forgotten me," Li Mu said with some embarrassment. "A few days ago, there was a murder case in the county government. I was slightly injured when I was investigating the case. I just barely recovered now." Suhi's eyes were no longer bitter. She asked doubtfully, "Although your cultivation is not high, you know Taoist magic arts. The Buddha's light is also specialized in restraining demons and ghosts. What could hurt you?" "It was a jumping zombie," Li Mu explained. "I haven't fully mastered the thunder method. It's not easy to use it in front of outsiders." He didn't continue the topic. He put the food box on the table and said, "Before I came, I made a few dishes. Have a taste." He suddenly became interested. She floated to the table and said, "I haven't tasted food for 20 years. "You are so considerate." Li Mu just felt that it was not good to come empty-handed. But he was poor and had nothing to give her. The only thing he could give was his cooking skills. Although he had the body of evil ghost, her cultivation had reached the middle 3 realms. It was just a matter of a thought for her to condense a body. Even if the condensed body was fundamentally different from a living person's body, most of its functions were the same. Li Mu sat at the table and asked, "How does it taste?" Suhi's eyes flashed and said, "Even if you say you are not a constable, but a chef in a restaurant, I will believe you." Li Mu smiled and said, "If it suits your taste, I will bring more next time." Suhi reached out her hand and said, "It's a deal." Li Mu reached out his hand and clapped with her hand. He said, "It's a deal." Suhi ate slowly. Li Mu thought of the purpose of his visit and said, "I've found the person you asked me to inquire about last time." Suhi paused in the middle of picking up the food and asked faintly, "Is he still in Yangqiu County?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "He was only the county magistrate of Yangqiu County for half a year before he was transferred to another county. I heard that he was promoted and even married the county magistrate's daughter." Suhi pursed her lips. "Timon," Li Mu asked, "does Miss Su have a grudge against Cui Ming?" Suhi's eyes turned fierce. She gritted her teeth and said, "Life and death grudge." She did not explain in detail and Li Mu did not ask. He only remembered the name Cui Ming. Suhi had saved his life. If he had the chance to meet her enemy in the future, he would figure out the whole story and think of a way to avenge her. Suhi's expression quickly returned to normal. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "You are different from those men. In the future, you don't have to call me Miss Su. I am a few years older than you. It's not too much for you to call me sister, right?" Li Mu thought to himself that she was more than a few years older than him. Even if she was in her teens when she died, 20 years had passed and she was now in her 30s. There was a difference in seniority between the two of them. Seeing that Li Mu did not speak, Suhi looked at him. "Why are you unwilling?" Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "How old were you when you died?" Suhi was startled at first, then she said angrily, "I will always be 18. Demonic ghosts were different from humans. It seemed that age could not be calculated according to human standards. Li Mu hurriedly said, "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" "What I meant was, sister, are you full? If not, I'll go catch a fish from the lake and roast it for you." Just catching a fish and roasting it was tasteless. Fortunately, Li Mu had thought it through. He had considered Suhi's taste and prepared some seasonings at the bottom of the food box before he came. Although there was not much variety, it was enough to roast the fish. Suhi finished the food Li Mu brought and ate 2 more roasted fish. Only then did a satisfied expression appear on her face. Li Mu went to a faraway place and began practicing the thunder technique. Suhi knew him inside out. When it came to practicing Dao techniques, Li Mu had no need to avoid her. Moreover, this place was far away from the county. Practicing here would not attract the attention of others. Li Mu could practice without worry. Boom! A bolt of lightning fell from the sky, but it did not hit the ground. Instead, it flew towards Suhi. Li Mu was shocked. When he saw Suhi wave her sleeves, he realized that she had taken the initiative to attract the lightning. When the lightning entered Suhi's body, Her body only trembled. Then she looked at Li Mu and said, "This is indeed not an ordinary lightning. The Tao technique you used is also not an ordinary Tao technique. The scripture you used to save Lin Wan was also a little different. 3 years ago, there was a monk who wanted to save me. Their Buddha's light was not as powerful as yours." Li Mu sighed in his heart. His strongest attack could not hurt Su He at all. The difference in strength between the middle realm and the lower realm was too great. This thunder technique is not ordinary. Wait until you reach the soul condensation realm before you use it. Even I would not dare to take it head-on. Su He flew over and said, "Wait until you are proficient in this thunder technique. Below the middle realm, there will be few who can match you. Try to continue attacking me." With Su He as his sparring partner, occasionally giving Li Mu some pointers, he became more and more proficient in the use of the confrontation formula. In the beginning, he missed every time, but in the end, he could already predict and interrupt her attack route. Although he still could not accurately hit her, as long as Li Mu practiced diligently, it was only a matter of time. A moment later, Li Mu's Fa Li was exhausted and he sat on the grass to rest. Su He lazily laid down beside him and began to flip through the novels that Li Mu brought her. The first few books, after flipping through a few pages, she threw them aside. Those scholars, after 20 years, their routines had not changed at all. Mediocre youngsters who had a fortuitous encounter, slaying demons and eliminating evil for the people. Finally, they became famous all over the world, surrounded by beauties, and walked to the peak of life. She was already tired of reading these stories 20 years ago. Only this book called Strange Stories from a Strange Story. Every story was short, but it was thought-provoking. In the story, whether it was humans, demons, or ghosts, they were all made of flesh and blood. Unknowingly, she was fascinated by it. In those novels on the market, demons and ghosts were almost all evil. They sucked people's blood essence, stole people's souls, and brought disaster to the world. The protagonists in the stories often took it as their duty to slay demons and devils. But in this Strange Stories from a Strange Story, demons and ghosts were no longer evil. They also had human emotions. They were affectionate and righteous, true to their nature. The author of a book would often express their thoughts and views in the book. From this, it could be seen that this person called Pu Songling had a fair heart towards demons and ghosts. Su He looked at Li Mu and asked, "Is there more at the back?" Li Mu turned his head and said, "Only one volume has been published so far. I don't know when the second volume will be published. Next time, I'll give you the manuscript at the back." Su He was slightly stunned. She looked at him and asked, "You wrote this?" Li Mu said sorry to Pu Songling in his heart. There was no Mr. Strange Stories from a Strange Story in this world. In the eyes of Lu Hanyan and Wanwen, Li Mu was Pu Songling. There was no need for him to deny it in front of Su He. Otherwise, when she found out in the future, she might blame him for hiding it. He said casually, "The salary of a bailiff is not high. In my free time, I write novels to earn some royalties to support my family." It was not that Su He did not believe in Li Mu. She was just surprised that he, as a bailiff, could write such a delicate and touching story. After accepting this fact, she closed the Strange Stories from a Strange Story in her hand and said, "These stories are beautiful, but in reality, there are not so many infatuated men." Li Mu knew that she was prejudiced against men. This kind of view could not be changed in a short time. He could only say, "In this world, there are not many infatuated men, but not all of them are heartless people." Su He said, "Only someone with a pure heart like you can write such a story." Li Mu said, "Demons and ghosts are not all evil things that bring disaster to the world. I just wrote what I thought in my heart. What is written in the book is what you think in your heart." "Of course." Su He nodded and said, "I have one more question." Li Mu asked, "What question?" "Why do the humans in the book always have sex with female ghosts?" Su He looked into his eyes and asked, "Is this also what you think in your heart?" Chapter 57. Li Mu gave Su He Strange Stories from a Strange Story because he wanted to change her prejudice against men, Not because he wanted her to worry about such a pointless question. He also didn't want her to misunderstand and think that he was hinting at something. Li Mu opened his mouth and said, This is not important. He picked up the book again and said, Speaking of which, there are not only female ghosts in the book, there are also all kinds of female demons and even dragons. You don't have any weird fetishes, do you? Of course not. Li Mu said with a straight face, I'm not married yet, and my primordial yang is still there. How could I have such fetishes? What I want to express is that love has no boundaries. No matter if it's a human, demon, or ghost, they all have the right to pursue love. He said indifferently, even if you do, it's nothing. After all, I'm still your sister. Do you want me to catch a female ghost that can only materialize and give it to you next time? I still have things to do at the yamen. Goodbye. After leaving Clearwater Bay, Li Mu let out a long sigh of relief. The first time they met, he knew that He was not easy to deal with. After they got familiar with each other, she drove so fast that Li Mu could not keep up with her. A female ghost with 20 years of cultivation was indeed different from Lin Wan, who had just died. Next time, he should not give her the latter part of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, in case she thought that Li Mu was hinting at something and turned Li Mu into her own kind on a whim. This was not the first time she had such thoughts. Li Mu treated her as a friend, but she always wanted Li Mu's life. Friendship was friendship, but when it was time to guard against her, he still had to guard against her. When he returned to the county and passed by the bookstore, Li Mu glanced at it from afar. Strange Stories from a Strange Story had been officially on sale for 2 days. From the sales, it was not very high, but the bookstore would not lose money. In fact, it would make a small profit. Yunyan Pavilion was just a newly opened bookstore in Yangqiu County. Its influence was limited to Yangqiu County. It only had a limited number of readers, and there was competition from other bookstores. It was impossible to achieve financial freedom for a book to become popular. Fortunately, those who could read usually came from well-off families. Every bookstore had a fixed number of customers. The Yunyan Pavilion had just opened, so it was the time to attract customers. Although Strange Stories was also a supernatural novel, its content was all-encompassing. Whether one wanted to read love stories, horror stories, strange stories, or fantasies about female ghosts and demonesses who were lonely at night, one Strange Stories from 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 Strange. Li Mu noticed that there were 20 to 30% more customers in the bookstore than usual. For the follow-up story of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, he planned to split the profits. This way, although he would receive less money in a short period of time, he would still have a steady income. In addition to the music and drama that Lu Hanyen had adapted, as well as the money that he earned from the storytelling in the tea house, although it was impossible to get rich suddenly, it was enough to get him out of poverty. The yamen was not busy every day. Li Mu's injury leave was still half a month away. In this half a month, he planned to collect enough anger. He had already reminded old Wang that if there was a suitable case in the yamen, he should get Zhang Shan to inform him. In the next few days, other than going to the tea house to collect anger, Li Mu spent most of his time cultivating at home. Every time he condensed a soul, his mana would increase tremendously. But the most important thing was still his daily guidance and cultivation. Other than that, he would also spend a certain amount of time every day using his mana to nourish the Bai sword. Although the material of the magical item was important, the improvement in the later stages depended entirely on the owner. An extraordinary magical item, in addition to Li Mu's army formula, could have an unexpected effect in a battle with demons and ghosts. Just as Li Mu was cultivating in isolation in Yangqiu County, A novel called Strange Stories from a Strange Story was quietly circulating in the streets. This novel was published by the Yunyan Pavilion. It was different from normal storybooks. Each volume was made up of dozens of stories. These stories were long and short. The short stories were about 100 words, and the long stories were about 1,000 words. The number of words was irregular, and the content was also strange and varied. In the first few days, there were only readers who found it novel. But in the next few days, the number of people who bought this book suddenly increased, and it attracted the attention of other bookstores. They analyzed this novel seriously, and finally analyzed 2 reasons why this book was so popular. First, it was new. For more than 10 years, stories about demons and ghosts had been popular. The plot had changed again and again, but in the end, it could not escape the 4 words, slay demons and exorcise demons. However, Strange Stories from a Strange Story was different. In this book, demons and ghosts were not all evil creatures that sucked people's blood and souls. Some of them had flesh and blood, and were loyal and righteous. In terms of emotions, they were no different from humans. This novel way of writing attracted many readers. Second, it was broad. This book was a collection of stories, and there was no fixed theme. If you wanted to read love stories, there were Xiao Qian and Ing Ning. If you wanted to read humorous jokes, there were Fox Alliance and Ghost Command. If you wanted to read strange stories, there were Corpse Transformation and The Man in the Ear. When the night was lonely and unbearable, the ghostly fox in the book had a different kind of charm. After Sage Time, the principles in the book were thought-provoking. The author of this book was the Taoist priest. His imagination was bold and unconstrained, and it also had deep connotations and discussions about reality. Those who read this book, regardless of gender, old or young, would find their own enjoyment in it. In a certain bookstore, the shopkeeper slapped his head and said regretfully, I misjudged him. In another bookstore, someone hurriedly said, quickly go and find this Pooh Songling. See if we can spend a lot of money to get him back. This person is a talent. In the Yunyan Pavilion, shopkeeper Huang was beaming with joy. He looked at Lu Hanyan and said, Miss, your eyes are as bright as torches. Old Huang admires you. With Strange Stories from a Strange Story, our bookstore will be able to gain a firm foothold in this place. Almost every bookstore had a few popular authors, and a few best-selling novels served as a front. The Yunyan Pavilion had just opened, and there were not many readers. The unexpected popularity of Strange Stories from a Strange Story had allowed them to gain a large number of readers. As long as the subsequent volumes maintained the standard, they would be able to retain these readers and become regular customers of the store. Lu Hanyan coughed softly, but did not say anything. Actually, she had only felt pity for Li Mu. She did not even read what he wrote. She did not expect that her small act of kindness would bring about such a huge change in the bookstore. She picked up a book and said to shopkeeper Huang, look after the store. I have some matters to attend to, so I will go back first. In the small courtyard, Wan had just returned after eating and drinking to her heart's content. Li Mu rested for a while, then began to practice the sword manual that Li Qing had given him. Although the Bai sword was an immortal weapon, it was the same as a normal sword. Only when it was combined with sword moves could it unleash its greatest power. When Li Qing battled with the tiger demon only relied on its brute strength and instincts to fight against wild beasts. Li Qing relied on her nimble movements and sword moves to easily suppress the tiger demon even though she did not have the advantage in terms of strength. At that time, Li Mu was determined to consolidate these basic skills. These basic skills could not be learned quickly. There were more than 10 basic sword moves. If he wanted to practice more complex sword techniques, he had to first learn these basic sword moves. Sword piercing, cloud sword, chop sword, hang sword, sweep sword, point sword. Under the scorching sun, Li Mu patiently practiced these basic sword moves over and over again in the courtyard. Only when his entire body was drenched in sweat and he could no longer raise his arms did he put down his sword. He took off his outer and inner robes, leaving only his trousers on. He poured a bucket of cold water over his head, and the cold feeling spread from the top of his head to the rest of his body. He felt indescribably comfortable. After being reborn, Li Mu was quite satisfied with his body. In his previous life, he had been bedridden for a long time. His body had long been tortured by illness. Now, although his body was not very strong, it was very healthy. It was just that he did not have the 7 spirits. When he got up in the morning, it was a bit of a fly in the ointment. Because constables often patrolled and practiced, when he took off his clothes, the muscles on his arms were not exaggerated. He also had the 6-pack abs that Li Mu was very envious of in his previous life. His almost perfect figure made even Lu Hanyan, who was at the door, stunned for a moment when she saw it. The next moment, she quickly covered her eyes and exclaimed, "Why are you not wearing clothes? I just finished practicing and went to take a shower." Li Mu explained. Suddenly, he froze on the spot. Although Lu Hanyan covered her eyes, her vision still leaked through the gaps between her fingers. Not only that, at this moment, in Li Mu's eyes, her body was shining with a faint light. Yellow light. Of the 7 emotions and 7 colors, yellow was desire. Li Mu swore that from the beginning to the end, he really only treated Lu Hanyan as a friend. He never thought that when he treated her as a friend, she actually wanted to. Li Mu hurriedly guided this trace of desire over. This was the first trace of desire he had collected. Thinking that other people relied on hard work to cultivate, but he actually had to rely on his body, he could not help but feel sad. The light on Lu Hanyan's body flashed and disappeared. She said angrily, "Hurry up and put on your clothes." Chapter 58. Li Mu went back to his room and changed his clothes. When he came out again, he observed Lu Hanyan for a while, but he didn't see the light just now. After thinking about it carefully, he understood the reason behind this. If he and Lu Hanyan were to switch roles, if it was Li Mu who saw her naked body, he would probably have a moment of impulse. Just like when he was walking on the road and met a beautiful girl, he would instinctively take a few more glances. This trace of lust was based on instinct, not that Lu Hanyan really had any improper thoughts about him. Li Mu felt that it was a pity. If she really had any improper thoughts about him, it would be good. Lust was related to the condensation of the last soul. It was better to let her take a few more glances than to sell her body. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu with a slightly red face. She wanted to forget the scene just now, but the more she wanted to forget, the clearer the image became. She coughed softly, looked away from Li Mu, and changed the topic. "I'm here to ask you, have you finished writing the 2nd volume of Strange Stories from a Strange Story? Li Mu nodded and said, "It's done. I'll bring it to you later." Lu Hanyan said, "There are many people who like Strange Stories from a Strange Story. After the 2nd volume, I suggest that you and the bookstore distribute the profits according to the profits. At that time, after excluding the printing and labor costs, you can get 50% of the total profits. Do you have any problems with this?" Li Mu understood the market. Ordinary authors could only get 30% of the profits from books. The more famous authors could get 40%. Lu Hanyan gave him 50%, which was already very considerate. Naturally, there was no problem. Lu Hanyan held a book of Strange Stories from a Strange Story and said to Li Mu, "I have a question." Li Mu raised his eyes and looked at her. "What question?" Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu with a strange look and asked, "Why is it that in your book, the ones who fall in love with human men are either beautiful female ghosts or shape-shifted female demons?" "Is it?" Without waiting for her to finish, Li Mu explained, "Of course it's because the readers like it. That's why they'll buy it. In order to make money, I have no other choice. I'm not interested in female ghosts or demonesses. I still prefer beautiful women. What I mean is, I still prefer human women." Lu Hanyan looked at him strangely and said, I understand. Before Lu Hanyan left, the way she looked at Li Mu made him very depressed. He just wanted to copy books to make some money. It was not worth it to be seen as a pervert who would be attracted to a female ghost and a fox. Li Mu sighed and returned to the study. He opened the records of monsters in the 10 continents and started reading. Strange Stories from a Strange Story was just the imagination of a poor scholar. In reality, there was no story of a fox turning into a human and repaying him with her body. In the records of monsters in the 10 continents, there was no record of a fox repaying a debt of gratitude. However, there were a few detailed accounts of a fox taking revenge. The most recent case related to this happened 30 years ago. A county magistrate of a certain county killed a nest of foxes for no reason. He skinned the foxes and made them into foxskin quilts. However, what he did not know was that one of the foxes actually escaped. 20 years later, the fox had successfully cultivated and slaughtered the county magistrate's entire family. It skinned them and pulled out their tendons. Their corpses were hung in front of the county magistrate's gate. Although the fox was killed by the imperial court in the end, it made people have a deep understanding of the fox clan's vengeful nature. Looking at the story about foxes, he wondered what happened to the little fox he saved last time. He hoped it would not fall into the hunter's trap again. Li Mu was distracted for a while and continued to flip through the pages in his hand. Outside Yangqiu County, there was a secluded valley in the mountains that was rarely visited by humans. A few foxes were jumping and playing in the mountains. An old woman walked into the valley and the group of foxes immediately rushed over. "Grandma, Grandma, you're back. Grandma, what good things did you bring us this time?" "It's roast chicken. I smell roast chicken." "Grandma, I want to eat roast chicken." The foxes that could speak human language surrounded the old woman and jumped non-stop. The old woman put down the basket she was carrying at her waist and took out a few roast chickens. She distributed them to the foxes. The foxes held the roast chickens in their mouths and ran away quickly. Only a white fox remained in the same place. It looked at her eagerly and said softly, "Grandma, Granny hasn't forgotten you." The old woman smiled and took out a thin book from her bosom. She said, "This book is the best seller in the city. Tell me, you don't like roasted chicken, but why do you like these things written by humans?" "If I had known, I wouldn't have taught you how to read." In the old woman's nagging, the little fox held the book in its mouth and ran under the tree. It put the book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio on the ground and used its small claws to flip open the pages and read seriously. This story called Xiao Qian made it tear up. When it saw the ending where Xiao Qian and Ning Kaichen lived happily together, its tears turned into laughter. In the story of Fragrance of Lotus, why did the fox spirit and female ghost get together with humans? Could the fox spirit and female ghost also fall in love with humans? Then it saw Fox Couplet. It was about two fox beauties who barged into a scholar's garden. The scholar sternly told them to leave. The fox spirit sneered at the scholar and made a couplet for him to match. The couplet was Wu and Shu in the same body, only lacking a little in the stomach. The scholar couldn't match it. After the fox spirit sneered at him, she matched the couplet herself and left. Wu and Shu in the same body, only lacking a little in the stomach. The fox spirit matched the couplet with already gone, why don't you double pick? The little fox rolled its eyes a few times but still couldn't understand the meaning of the couplet. She couldn't help but admire the fox spirit's literary talent. They were both foxes, but the fox spirit could match the couplet. She couldn't even recognize all the words. She held the book in her mouth and ran to the old woman. She asked curiously, "Grandma, Grandma, what does double pick mean?" The old woman looked at the fox couplet and spat. She said, "Don't look at these messy things. Go and practice." Since her grandma didn't tell her, the little fox could only walk back with the book in her mouth. She whispered, read one more, and I'll go and practice." She opened the book again and muttered, "Xiao Chui, it's about a fox repaying a debt of gratitude." How does a fox repay a debt of gratitude? Yunyan Pavilion, Tea House. Noon was the fixed time for the young storyteller to tell a story. Every day at noon, the tea house would be full. Many customers would come an hour in advance to reserve a seat. Those who came late and did not manage to get a seat would order a pot of tea and stand in the corner to drink. To them, drinking tea wasn't important. What was important was listening to the story. God knows where the young man got so many strange stories. Sometimes it was heart-wrenching, sometimes it was thought-provoking, sometimes it was hilarious. Every time, people couldn't stop. Today, he was telling the story of a fox repaying a debt of gratitude. In Yuntai County, there was a hunter. One day, when he went hunting in the mountains, he caught a fox. Seeing that it was pitiful, he couldn't bear to kill it, so he let it go. But what the hunter didn't expect was that after he let the fox go, something strange happened. Every day, when the hunter came back from hunting, there would be a bowl of piping hot porridge in the pot. After drinking the porridge, the hunter went hunting in the mountains. Half a year later, a Taoist priest told the hunter that he had a strong demonic aura. The hunter remembered the porridge and brought it to the Taoist priest. The Taoist priest told the hunter that the porridge couldn't be eaten because it was made by a fox spirit. The next day, the hunter pretended to go hunting and secretly hid in the pile of firewood outside the door. When he heard strange noises coming from inside the house, he suddenly pushed the door open and found, "If you want to know what happened, meet me tomorrow at the same time. Be there or be square. Bastard, you're doing it again. I beg you, please do something humane." Amidst the curses of the crowd, Li Mu jumped off the stage, slipped out of the back door, and walked to the front door. He followed the guests of the tea house and cursed cliffhanger. After he had stirred up enough anger, he came to the county government. After a while, Zhang Shan walked into the duty room from outside and asked curiously, "Li Mu, have you heard the story of the hunter and the fox? What do you think the hunter saw when he opened the door?" Li Mu said, "Of course it was the fox cooking porridge." Zhang Shan was stunned. "That's it?" Li Mu glanced at him and said, "What else? If it wasn't porridge, then was it the fox that was blaspheming itself in the pot?" Zhang Shan stood there thinking. Li Mu saw a familiar figure flash by outside the door and immediately walked out of the duty room. He walked to Li Qing and said, "Boss, I've accumulated enough anger. I think I can start to condense the second spirit." Chapter 59. The courage of the tiger demon was extraordinary. Li Mu could not refine the anger in his body. When it met the pure courage of the tiger demon, it melted instantly. After the sun had set, Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed with his 5 hearts facing the sky. He said in a low voice, "The 9 cycles of plain qi, the soul controlling evil, the heavenly beast guarding the door, the delicate girl guarding the pass, the 7 souls and softness are at peace with me, do not act rashly." After a few minutes, he suddenly opened his eyes and said, "Concealed arrow, condense." Within Li Mu's body, the gray light that represented anger flashed. It disappeared from the surface of his body into the depths of his flesh. At the same time, Li Mu once again felt the familiar feeling when he condensed the first soul. When the second soul was condensed, the instantaneous increase in his mana was equivalent to a month of cultivation. Li Mu sighed in relief. Although he had only condensed 2 of the 7 souls, it had only taken him a month. If he could condense 2 more souls in the next 4 months, he would be able to break through the half-year limit that the Taoist priest said. After condensing the second soul, Li Mu tried to use the Tao techniques that he could not use before. He found that although his mana had increased, he could only master the first 2 words of the 9 syllables mantra. The only thing was that the casting time was longer than before. Endurance was always a good thing. What he needed to do next was to prepare for the 3rd soul of the sparrow shade. Condensing the sparrow shade required a large amount of grief. Li Mu had already found the method to collect grief. However, Lu Hanyan had not finished arranging the script of butterfly transformation. No matter how anxious Li Mu was, it was useless. He wanted to ask Lu Hanyan, but she did not come yesterday. However, today was the day that her youth-retaining talisman lost its effect. Li Mu finished the youth-retaining talisman and prepared to ask her when she came to collect it. However, Li Mu waited until night time, but Lu Hanyan did not appear. Li Mu lit a charcoal fire in the courtyard and placed the skewers of meat on it. Not long after, Wan ran over from next door and squatted beside Li Mu to watch. Li Mu handed her a skewer of barbecued streaky pork and asked, "Where is your miss?" Wan said while eating, "Miss is in the shop. She hasn't come back yet." Li Mu asked, "Is the shop very busy these days?" Wan nodded and said, "The tea houses and bookstores have a lot of customers, especially the bookstores. As soon as the new books are printed, they will be sold out. A few bookstores asked about the author of Strange Stories from Liao Zhai, but young mistress didn't tell them. There was also a bookstore that wanted to buy Strange Stories from Liao Zhai, but young mistress didn't agree. Lu Hanyan was a woman, but she dared to wander around in an unfamiliar place with a servant girl. She had to resist pressure from all sides. It was indeed not easy. Li Mu had Wan bring the youth-retaining talisman back to her. Ever since his mana increased, the effectiveness of the youth-retaining talisman increased from 3 days to more than 6 days. The effectiveness of Fulu was mainly related to 2 factors. One was the quality of the materials used. Ordinary cinnabar and yellow paper could only carry a limited amount of mana. No matter how powerful the talisman writer was, he would not be able to draw a Fulu that exceeded the limits of the materials. The second was the cultivation of the talisman writer. When the quality of the Fulu materials was extremely high, the greater the mana of the talisman writer, the longer the power and effectiveness of the Fulu. Of course, this was for ordinary cultivators. Some of the more powerful cultivators could even condense talismans out of thin air. Of course, this was not something that Li Mu could come into contact with at his current level. After condensing the second essence, he returned to the Yamen to cancel his injury leave and patrolled Weiyang Street daily. The Yunyan Pavilion was located on Weiyang Street. Li Mu was wearing his official uniform. When he strolled into the tea house, he heard a commotion coming from inside. Where's that scumbag who always ends chapters? Why hasn't he come out today? Hurry up and call him out. We've been waiting here for more than an hour. We still haven't finished the story of the fox's repayment yesterday. What did the hunter see when he opened the door? The waiter of the tea house looked at the crowd and said helplessly, "That storyteller has already left the tea house. We don't know where he went either." What? Left? Why would he leave? Did you guys embezzle his wages? Hurry up and call him out. If he doesn't come out today, I'm not leaving. Li Mu stood at the door and listened for a while. Then he shook his head and left. Now that the second essence had been condensed, he no longer needed to collect their anger by breaking chapters. His identity as a storyteller had naturally come to an end. He had returned to his original job as a constable. Walking out of the tea house and passing by the bookstore, Li Mu heard a familiar voice coming from inside. His footsteps paused. In the bookstore, Lu Hanyan's pretty face was frosty. She said to a middle-aged man, "Shopkeeper Ren, what you said is impossible. Please go back." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Shopkeeper Lu, why do you have to do this? We can all do business together. You're just a weak woman. Don't you feel tired running such a big store? I'm just helping you out of kindness." Lu Hanyan said with a cold face, "Shopkeeper Ren, you don't have to worry." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "Since Shopkeeper Lu is unwilling, I won't force you. Goodbye." Li Mu walked in from outside and turned to take a look. Then he turned back and asked, "Who was that?" "The shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore." Lu Hanyan walked to the table and said, he wanted to buy the rest of Strange Stories from Liao Zhai and publish it with the Yunyan Pavilion. I rejected him. There was no copyright protection law in this world. The Yunyan Pavilion's books could be printed by other bookstores. Similarly, the Yunyan Pavilion could also print their books. However, without the original manuscripts, they had to wait until the Yunyan Pavilion sold the books. Then they would buy the printed books back and reprint them. Reprinting took a lot of time and effort. In the middle of this, a lot of time would be wasted. Others would have already bought the books from the Yunyan Pavilion. The ones they worked so hard to print could only be destroyed in their hands. Only by having the original manuscripts could they dominate the market and obtain the greatest profits. Lu Hanyan was a little angry. She said, "Strange Stories from Liao Zhai is now the Yunyan Pavilion's top book. New customers rely on it to attract them. How can we sell it to them? Moreover, the price they offered was clearly robbery. They're bullying me because I'm new here and don't have anyone above me." Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Who said you don't have anyone above you?" Lu Hanyan said, Wan and I have only been here for less than 2 months. We don't have time to make arrangements. How can there be anyone above me? Don't say that a bailiff is not an official. Li Mu looked at her with dissatisfaction and said, "Don't forget, this is my jurisdiction. Everything that happens on Weiyang Street is under my jurisdiction. The person above you is me." Lu Hanyan glanced at him and asked, "Is a bailiff an official?" Li Mu turned and walked outside. He said, "Since a bailiff is not an official, if you get bullied in the future, don't come looking for me." Lu Hanyan hurriedly pulled him and said, "It's fine, it's fine. Lord Li, I'm new here. I'll rely on you to take care of me in the future. Lord, please sit. I'll make tea for you." Strictly speaking, a bailiff was not an official, but an official. However, an official in Great Zhou received a salary from the state and was not just an errand boy. Any case that happened on Weiyang Street, whether it was theft, robbery, bullying, molesting, or swindling, Li Mu had the right to manage it. After the event, he only needed to submit an official document to the Zhang County magistrates. If there was a serious case in his jurisdiction, Li Mu also had to take responsibility. Li Mu finished his tea and went out to continue patrolling. Lu Hanyan personally saw him out. Watching the figure in official uniform disappear into the crowd, Lu Hanyan looked away. Her eyes were still a little absent-minded. When she was 7 years old, she was sold to the music house by her parents. She could only eat 1 meal a day. The rest of her time was spent practicing the zither. When her fingers were cut by the zither strings, she had to bandage them herself. When she was bullied by the older musicians, she could only endure it. She practiced with all her might and learned all the instruments in the music house. She played for more than 12 hours a day and refused the help of countless men who had ulterior motives. After she saved enough money to redeem herself, she played even harder and earned enough money to open a shop. All of this was her own hard work. When she was hungry, she would cook for herself. When her clothes were torn, she would mend them herself. Alone, she brought a servant girl and traveled thousands of miles from Zhongjuan to here. She bought 4 shops and recruited people from everywhere to open the Yunyan Pavilion. For more than 10 years, she had never relied on anyone. She also never knew what it felt like to have someone to rely on. Now she seemed to know. Chapter 60. Lu Hanyan seemed to have realized that Weiyang Street was under Li Mu's protection. She had treated him exceptionally well these past 2 days. Not only did she personally cook for lunch, the dishes she made were all Li Mu's favorites. If not for the fact that she did not take any further action, Li Mu would have reason to suspect that she had some thoughts about him after seeing his body that day. After eating and drinking to their fill, Lu Hanyan went to work on the shop. Li Mu went to the study and took out a brush, ink, and talisman paper to practice a few of the new fulu that he had learned. Other than Taoist techniques, many of the Taoist spells and fulu techniques were open and transparent. Li Mu was not a disciple of the fulu school and could not learn the unique fulu techniques of the fulu school. However, he could obtain some of the basic fulu techniques through other means. After condensing the second essence, Li Mu asked Old Wang to search his library. He actually found a complete collection of the basic fulu techniques of Taoism. Other than the soul-locking talisman and the youth-retaining talisman, Li Mu also found a few other fulu techniques that he could draw at his current level. The ghost-seeking talisman had a similar effect as the immortal shows the way. However, it was not as comprehensive as the immortal shows the way. It could only search for ghosts by sensing yin qi. Of course, with the incomplete effect, the restriction on mana was much less. With Li Mu's current insignificant cultivation, he could easily draw it. The opposite of the ghost-seeking talisman was the demon-seeking talisman. It worked on a similar principle. Those with profound cultivation could use these 2 types of fulu to search for demons and ghosts within a radius of dozens of miles. Li Mu's mana was limited. The fulu's sensing range was only a few dozen feet. In addition, he had also learned an evil-warding talisman and a ghost-slaying talisman. As for divine abilities, with his current cultivation, he could not learn a single one. He had only learned 2 or 3 small auxiliary spells. In fact, what Li Mu wanted to learn the most was the soul-searching talisman, which was the fulu that he used to search his past memories. However, this fulu was not of the lowest level and required a cultivator of the soul condensation realm to write it. Fortunately, He had gotten a few from Li Qing last time, which was enough for him to use for a while. Li Mu picked up a piece of fulu paper, stuck it to his forehead, and began to copy the rest of the content. He had to make some slight changes to the names of the places and the names of the officials to make it fit the geography of the 10 continents and 3 islands. On the way back to the county office, Li Mu passed by the Yunyan Pavilion. He took a look and realized that there were more customers than the previous 2 days. Yangqiu County was not big and there were even fewer people who were literate. However, in the North County, Yangqiu County was located on the main road and was the hub that connected all the counties. Usually, there would be a lot of people and it could guarantee a steady flow of customers. This was probably the reason why Lu Hanyan chose to set up her shop in Yangqiu County. Indeed, strange stories did not disappoint Li Mu. On one hand, he could earn a steady income from it. On the other hand, as a new shop, the Yunyan Pavilion could attract customers and stand firm against the competition of other bookstores. This was Li Mu's way of repaying Lu Hanyan. In a tea house not far from the Yunyan Pavilion. Seeing the steady flow of customers, a young man said, "Shopkeeper, that Lu woman is quite capable. She's only been in Yangqiu County for a little more than a month, but her business has grown to this extent. She's even snatched away many of our customers." The middle-aged man sitting next to him smiled and said, "She's still too young and doesn't know how to do business. She's a woman who's new here and doesn't have any background. Doing this will anger a lot of people." The young man asked, "Should we teach her a lesson?" "No need." The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "Yesterday, I saw that Ren from the Four Seas bookstore went to the Yunyan Pavilion. He seemed to want to discuss some terms with shopkeeper Lu. In the end, it didn't seem like they came to an agreement. Ren isn't a good person." The young man hesitated and said, "But if we don't do anything now, the Four Seas bookstore will take all the benefits. What's the hurry?" The middle-aged man said, "Let's wait and see. If a woman dares to make a living outside, who knows if she has any background? Let the Four Seas bookstore test the waters first." The young man thought for a while and saluted the middle-aged man with admiration. "Shopkeeper, you're really thoughtful." While eating with Wanwan, Li Mu suddenly remembered that he hadn't seen Lu Hanyan for 2 or 3 days. The Yunyan Pavilion had 4 shops in Yangqiu County. Among them, the bookstore's business was the best. After Li Mu left, the tea house's business declined. Lu Hanyan discussed with Li Mu and asked him to go to the tea house as a storyteller once every 7 days. Li Mu agreed without hesitation. He had a lot of stories and didn't have to worry about finishing them. Once every 7 days wasn't a lot. There was no harm in collecting more stories of the 7 emotions. A Chinese strange stories from a strange story allowed the bookstore to gain a foothold in Yangqiu County. As for the music and opera house, they were just getting started. Coincidentally, the music and opera for Transforming into Butterflies were being arranged. Lu Hanyan was busy with these and had been resting in the shop for the past 2 days. After Wanwan finished eating, she looked at Li Mu pitifully and asked, "Can you cook another bowl of noodles?" "I'll send it to Miss later." Li Mu nodded and said, "I'll be going to the county office later. I'll send it to her on the way." He looked at Wanwan and asked, "How old is your miss this year?" The young girl thought for a while and said, 21. Lu Hanyan was 3 years older than Li Mu. Women in Great Zhou didn't get married so early. However, when they were 18 or 19 years old, they usually considered getting married. It was rare for them to not get married at 21 years old. Li Mu asked in a gossipy manner, "Hasn't she thought about getting married?" Wanwan was puzzled and asked, "Why would she want to get married?" Li Mu said, "When she gets married, she'll have someone to rely on." Wanwan said, "Miss said that she doesn't rely on men. She only relies on herself. Men are unreliable." After thinking for a while, she realized something. She immediately looked at Li Mu and said, "I'm not talking about young master. Young master is not a thing." Li Mu roughly knew why Lu Hanyan had developed such a personality. Her parents' betrayal had caused great harm to her heart. After she became an adult, she wouldn't easily trust anyone. Of course, another important reason was that she was originally a rich woman. In this world, there weren't many things that couldn't be bought with money. She didn't need to rely on others. It was more likely that others relied on her. When Li Mu sent the food to Yunyan Pavilion, Lu Hanyan was arranging a song in the music workshop. Li Mu didn't understand music and could only rely on his memory. Lu Hanyan needed to keep the main structure of The Lovers of Liang and recompose it. This wasn't an easy task. Li Mu saw that her complexion was somewhat haggard. He put the food box on the table and said, "Eat and rest. If you continue like this, the youth-retaining talisman won't have any effect." Lu Hanyan nodded, but her gaze didn't leave the score. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Remember to eat. I'm going to patrol." A moment later, Lu Hanyan put down the score and leaned back on the chair. She stretched her body and suddenly heard a sound from her stomach. She then remembered that she had been changing the tune of Transforming into a Butterfly since early morning and hadn't eaten anything. She opened the food box on the table. The bowl of yangcha noodles was still steaming. A poached egg lay in the bowl, exuding a tempting fragrance. Lu Hanyan's appetite was greatly stimulated. She picked up the chopsticks and quickly finished the bowl of noodles. She even drank the soup. It had to be said that Wanwan didn't like to eat the noodles he cooked for no reason. After eating, she rubbed her sore eyebrows. She remembered Li Mu's advice and wanted to rest. However, she remembered that as long as she slept for the next 2 days, she would have terrible nightmares. After hesitating for a moment, she picked up the score again. The night was quiet. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed, guiding her cultivation as usual. At a certain moment, his closed eyes suddenly opened. Just a moment ago, Li Mu suddenly felt a trace of vigilance in his heart. This vigilance was very subtle. If he hadn't been concentrating on his cultivation, he might not have noticed it. After a cultivator refined the first soul, the corpse dog, he could develop spiritual awareness outside of the 5 senses. He could keenly sense the impending danger. This sense of vigilance was so subtle that it meant that the danger was not directed at Li Mu. Or perhaps, the thing that triggered this sense of vigilance was too weak to pose much of a threat to him. Perhaps he was too sensitive. Li Mu closed his eyes again. However, not long after, his eyes opened again. He suddenly stood up and looked in a certain direction. Just a moment ago, he felt a trace of vigilance in his heart. The source of this feeling was the house of Lu Hanyan and Wanwan. At the same time, the ghost-hunting talisman on the table also emitted a faint fluctuation of mana. Chapter 61. Li Mu walked out of the room and came to the courtyard wall. With a light leap, his whole body flew up and landed in the courtyard next door. It was already late at night. Lu Hanyan and Wanwan had already gone to bed, and the lights in all the rooms had been extinguished. Li Mu walked to the door of Lu Hanyan's bedroom. He heard 2 breathing sounds coming from the room, and also felt 2 familiar auras. One belonged to Lu Hanyan, and the other belonged to Wanwan. There was also another aura, full of yin qi, which did not belong to a human. The door was closed, but the window was opened a small crack. Lu Hanyan must have opened it to ventilate the night. Li Mu opened the window and jumped in. He used his heavenly eye and looked in the direction of the bed. Lu Hanyan and Wanwan were sleeping on the bed. An illusory shadow floated above them. Traces of yin qi spread out from the illusory shadow and wrapped around Lu Hanyan's body. In her sleep, Lu Hanyan seemed to have dreamed of something terrible. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted, and her body was curled up, trembling slightly. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the room. The resentful spirit also turned her head and looked over. She did not know why this person broke into the boudoir of 2 women in the middle of the night. The figure slowly floated over and floated in front of Li Mu, tilting her head to look at him. The female ghost's hair was disheveled, and her face was pale and bloodless. There were only the whites of her eyes in her dead fish eyes. There were no pupils, but her lips were strangely red. If Li Mu had encountered this ghost a month ago, he would have been frightened. At this moment, not only did he not have the slightest fear, but he also smiled at the female ghost and asked, "Have you seen enough?" The female ghost's figure immediately retreated, as if she had been greatly frightened. She screamed, "You can see me." Li Mu said coldly, "What kind of ghost are you?" How dare you be so presumptuous here? Who let you come here? The ghost didn't answer, but a panicked cry came from the direction of the bed. It was unknown when Lu Hanyan had woken up. She shielded Wanwan with one hand and wrapped the quilt with the other. She shouted, "Who are you? Why you here? Hurry up and leave. If you don't leave, I'll call for help. My neighbor is a constable. He's very powerful," Li Mu said helplessly. "It's me." Hearing Li Mu's voice, Lu Hanyan was slightly relieved, but she still wrapped the quilt tightly around her body and asked nervously, "What are you doing here?" "Now is not the time to talk about this." Li Mu glanced at the ghost and saw that she was about to escape. With a wave of his hand, a fulu flew out and stuck to the door. The ghost wanted to escape through the door, but was bounced back. She ran to the window and another fulu flew out. Li Mu used 5 exorcism talismans in a row and stuck them in 4 directions of the room. He even stuck one on the roof, completely blocking the female ghost's path. Lu Hanyan shrank in the corner of the bed and asked in panic, "What are you doing?" She had just woken up from a nightmare when she saw a black shadow standing in the room. She was greatly frightened. When she heard Li Mu's voice, she was slightly relieved, but when she saw his strange behavior, she was still a little panicked. As a man, he broke into her bedroom in the middle of the night. If it weren't for her trust in Li Mu, she would have already started shouting. Li Mu flicked his finger slightly, and the lights in the bedroom were lit up, illuminating the room. The light made Lu Hanyan's heart calm down. When she saw Li Mu, she immediately lowered her head and said in a trembling voice, What do you want to do?" Li Mu looked down and realized that he was worried that Lu Hanyan and Wanwan would be in danger. He came out in a hurry and didn't even have time to put on his clothes. At this moment, his upper body was still naked. Generally, in this kind of situation, it was obvious that he was here to pick flowers. If it was in court, Li Mu wouldn't even have a chance to explain. In order to avoid Lu Hanyan's misunderstanding, he thought for a moment and strode to Lu Hanyan's bed. What do you want to do? Don't come over. Li Mu, how can you do this?" Li Mu didn't explain anything. He made a hand seal with his right hand. After channeling his magic, he pointed his index finger at Lu Hanyan's forehead. "Don't go away," Lu Hanyan protected Wanwan. Her voice was trembling. She wrapped herself in the quilt and curled up in the corner of the bed. However, Li Mu didn't make any next move. She raised her head and saw that Li Mu was still standing by the bed. And in the corner of her room, there was a figure in white. The woman's hair was disheveled, her lips were red like blood, and her eyes were only white. She was exactly the same as the female ghost that appeared in her dreams these 2 days. "Ghost!" Her face turned pale. She covered her head with the quilt and hid in the corner of the bed, trembling. She said in shock, "Li Mu, there's a ghost, there's a ghost." The female ghost's path was blocked by Fulu. She knew that this person had some skills. Her body floated up and pounced on Li Mu. In the next moment, a golden light appeared in her eyes. When her hands touched the golden light, they immediately collapsed. The female ghost screamed and retreated. She curled up in the corner and looked at Li Mu in horror. She screamed, "Don't come here, don't come here." Li Mu forced the female ghost to the corner. While absorbing her fear, he coldly asked, "How dare you harm people in the county? Tell me, who ordered you?" Wanwan said that Lu Hanyan often had nightmares these 2 days. Li Mu originally thought that she was too tired. When he saw the female ghost, he realized that it was her doing. This resentful spirit repeatedly used ghost tricks on Lu Hanyan. It caused her body to be invaded by yin qi. If it was light, she would be weak for a while. If it was serious, she would fall seriously ill and her life would be in danger. The female ghost curled up in the corner. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at Li Mu. She said in a trembling voice, "I was ordered by someone. That person captured one of my souls. If I don't do as he said, he will disperse my soul." Li Mu asked, "Who?" The female ghost shook her head and said, "I don't know. He only said that after it was done, he would come and find me." Li Mu continued to ask, "What did he ask you to do?" The female ghost said, "He just asked me to pester this lady." for a person with 7 complete souls, with the cultivation of a vengeful spirit, it was impossible to directly harm them. It could only use some methods to torture their minds and drive the yin energy to invade their bodies. Through this indirect method, after half a month, the victim's mind and body would be on the verge of collapse, and they would die in a short period of time. The popular saying for this was that if one was haunted by something evil and did not ask someone to exorcise it, they would not live long. Some Jianghu swindlers took advantage of people's psychology to cheat. Some of the bolder ones would even raise a little ghost and drive it to harm people. When the person was tortured to the point of death, they would appear as a master and perform a play of catching ghosts and exorcising evil spirits. They would collect a high fee from it. These people had always been the targets of the Yaman's strict crackdown. Lu Hanyan had just arrived and someone had asked a little ghost to harm her. Li Mu did not need to guess to know that it must be because of business matters. However, he did not know who did it for the time being. However, there was no need to worry. Since they did this, they must have a purpose. They would definitely appear when the time was right. Li Mu looked back at Lu Hanyan and found that although she covered her head in the quilt, she still lifted a corner of the quilt and looked outside in panic. Li Mu glanced at the female ghost and said, "You, turn around and stand facing the wall." Li Mu had seen many demonic ghosts and even fought zombies. Naturally, he was not afraid of her appearance. However, when a normal person saw her ghost appearance, they could not help but be afraid. The female ghost obediently turned around and stood facing the wall. Li Mu walked to the bedside and said to Lu Hanyan, "That female ghost has been subdued by me. It's fine." Wan was awakened by the movement in the room. She crawled out of the quilt and rubbed her sleepy eyes. When she saw Li Mu, she was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Young master, why are you here?" She looked at Li Mu and caught a glimpse of a white shadow in the corner of the room. Coincidentally, the female ghost looked back nervously and met her eyes. "Ghost, ghost?" The girl jumped up from the bed and threw herself into Li Mu's arms. She cried out loud. Li Mu turned his head and coldly glanced at the female ghost. He angrily said, "Turn around. If you dare to look back, I will destroy your body and soul." Chapter 62. It was not a good idea to be naked all the time. At least, Wan and Lu Hanyan were still wearing undergarments. Li Mu did not have the habit of wearing clothes when he slept at night. He comforted Wan, put away the talisman, and drove the female ghost to his yard. Then he put her in the soul-recovering bag he picked up from the lizard spirit last time. After getting dressed, he went to the next door again. The two girls were already dressed. Lu Hanyan's face was still a little pale, and Wan's little face was still wet with tears. She shrank in the corner of the bed and shivered. Obviously, she was scared by the female ghost. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I thought, it's okay." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I just sensed the yin qi here and was worried that you were in danger. I came out in a hurry and may have scared you." Lu Hanyan looked around timidly and asked, "Then, where is the female ghost?" Li Mu said, "I took her. Tomorrow, I'll bring her to the county office for questioning." He looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "The female ghost said that she was ordered by someone. Do you have any suspects?" Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "The Yunyan Pavilion's business is getting better and better. It affects the interests of too many people. I don't know who it is." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow, I'll report this to the county magistrate. Don't worry, no matter who is behind this, we'll catch them and deal with them impartially." The female ghost had been subdued. It was already late at night. Li Mu didn't want to stay here any longer. He said, "It's very late. You should rest first. I'll deal with this matter tomorrow." Li Mu turned and prepared to leave. Lu Hanyan grabbed his hand and said in panic, "Don't go." At this moment, she only had the weakness of a woman. She no longer had the aura of a female shopkeeper. Wan quickly ran over and hugged Li Mu's arm. She sobbed, "Young master, I'm scared." In the middle of the night, a man and a woman were alone in a room. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I'll stick a few exorcism talismans outside. In this way, even if there are ghosts, they can't come in. Lu Hanyan asked in a trembling voice, will there be more ghosts coming? Li Mu wasn't sure either. He could only comfort her by saying, I don't think so. Lu Hanyan gave Wanwan a look. The little maidservant hugged Li Mu's arm and shook it. She begged, young master, I'm scared. Please don't go. If it was just Lu Hanyan, Li Mu could barely hold himself back. However, Wanwan was with him day and night. They even ate at the same table. When Li Mu was injured, she poured tea and massaged his back and shoulders. Looking at her pale face, Li Mu couldn't refuse. Li Mu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, then you can sleep. I'll keep watch outside. Anyway, he planned to cultivate at night. The courtyard was open, so the effect of cultivation would be better. How can that be? Go and bring a quilt over. Lu Hanyan shook her head and looked at Li Mu. She said, I'll have to trouble you to sleep on the ground tonight. No need. Li Mu shook his head and said, I'll be fine outside. Seeing Li Mu walk out, Lu Hanyan sat at the head of the bed, her eyes wandering. It was unknown what she was thinking. Wanwan hugged the quilt and quickly fell asleep again. A sweet smile appeared on her little face. Lu Hanyan stroked her head and looked outside. Although she couldn't see Li Mu's figure, she still felt indescribably calm. It seemed that as long as he was outside, even if some terrifying evil spirit came, it wouldn't be so terrible. After rejecting Lu Hanyan's proposal, Li Mu walked outside, closed the door, and sat at the stone table in the courtyard. The moon tonight was very round and the moonlight was bright and clear. Li Mu didn't immediately cultivate. Instead, he stared at the moon in a daze. It had been nearly 2 months since he came here. Because the non-poisonous soul hadn't been condensed, it was very difficult for him to fall asleep at night. He could only pass the time by guiding and cultivating. The night was long. He would often think of things from his previous life. Although his current body was no longer tormented by illness, there were still many things in that world that were worthy of his attachment. Lu Hanyan slowly walked over and draped a shawl over Li Mu's shoulders. She asked, What are you thinking about? Li Mu withdrew his gaze from the moon and said, Thinking about the past, family, friends. Lu Hanyan sat beside him with her arms around her knees. Looking at the moon above her head, she said, I've forgotten what my family looks like. Li Mu still clearly remembered the appearance of his parents. With the soul-searching talisman, his memories were even clearer. He looked at Lu Hanyan and said, I have a fulu that can let you recover your past memories. There's no need. Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, It's not easy for me to come to this point. I don't want to recall the past. How can there be such a strange fulu in this world? Li Mu didn't continue this topic. He asked, Why don't you go to sleep? Lu Hanyan said, I can't sleep. Li Mu asked, Were you scared by that female ghost? Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked in surprise, Aren't you afraid of ghosts? I used to be afraid. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, Later on, I've seen a lot of them, so I'm not afraid anymore. The evil ghosts are nothing but tricks. Your means are more powerful than theirs, so they should be afraid. Lu Hanyan sighed and said, You're obviously young, but you've experienced so much. It's not easy to be a constable, is it? Li Mu smiled and said, Nothing in this world is easy. For me, it's easy to catch ghosts, but it's difficult to run a shop. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to get to where you are today. As Li Mu spoke, there was suddenly no response beside him. He was about to turn his head when he felt a weight on his shoulder. Lu Hanyan was leaning on his shoulder and had fallen asleep. She had been haunted by the resentful ghost for the past few days, and she had suffered such a fright tonight. She should have a good rest. Li Mu picked her up and returned to the room. He put her on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Then he left and closed the door. When Lu Hanyan and Wanwan got up and opened the door, they saw that Li Mu was not outside the door. They panicked for no reason. At this moment, a figure flew over the courtyard wall and landed in the yard. Wanwan's eyes widened and she said in shock, Young master can fly. You're awake. Li Mu looked at them and said, I've made breakfast. Come and eat. Breakfast was very simple. Li Mu cooked some porridge and 2 side dishes. Wan drank 3 bowls of porridge in a row. She put down the bowl and wiped her mouth. She looked at Li Mu pitifully and said, "Young master, can you teach me how to catch ghosts?" Li Mu looked at her and asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you not afraid of ghosts?" "I'm afraid." Wan retracted her head. After a moment, she summoned her courage and said, "But I want to protect Mississippi." Lu Hanyan looked at her dotingly and then looked at Li Mu and asked, "Can we cultivate?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Everyone can cultivate, but everyone has different aptitudes and talents, and the difficulty of cultivation is also different. However, as long as one is willing to work hard and learn Dao techniques for 2 to 3 years, no matter how bad one's talent is, dealing with ghosts like last night is still more than enough." Lu Hanyan hesitated for a moment and finally summoned her courage to ask Li Mu, "Can you teach me cultivation?" After that, she hurriedly said, "I know this request may be a bit too much. If your sect doesn't allow it, then forget it. What's wrong with that?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't have any sect. I usually cultivate by myself. If you want to learn, I can teach you." Lu Hanyan's face lit up with joy. "I want to." Li Mu put down his chopsticks and said, "Wait for me to come back tonight. I have to go to the Yamen to deal with that female ghost." Lu Hanyan nodded. "I'll wait for you." Yangqiu County Government. Zhang County magistrates sat in the front hall and said, "I have some impression of Yunyan Pavilion. It's a newly opened shop in our county more than a month ago. I heard that their business is very good. At the end of the year, they will definitely pay taxes. What do you think happened to Yunyan Pavilion?" Li Mu said, "The shopkeeper of Yunyan Pavilion encountered some problems today. Someone used evil ghosts to harm people. This was much worse than a robbery." After Zhang County magistrates heard Li Mu's report, he slammed the table and said angrily, "This is outrageous. How can there be such audacious people in Yangqiu County?" "Li Mu." "Yes, sir." County Magistrate Zhang said in a low voice, "This is a case that happened in your jurisdiction. I order you to protect the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. You must ensure her safety. If anything happens to her, I will hold you accountable." Li Mu cupped his hands. "Sir." Chapter 63. In Great Zhou, public security and tax collection were important criteria for local officials. Lu Hanyan was the shopkeeper of Yunyan Pavilion. Yunyan Pavilion had 4 shops and was a major taxpayer in Yangqiu County. Therefore, Zhang County magistrates attached great importance to this case and ordered Li Mu to protect her closely. Fortunately, she was his neighbor. After Li Mu returned to the county office to report, he received orders from Zhang County magistrates and returned home. Lu Hanyan and Wan hadn't left yet. After what happened yesterday, they didn't dare to return to their courtyard. One was washing dishes in the kitchen, and the other was helping Li Mu tidy up his room. Lu Hanyan made Li Mu's bed. She turned around and saw him enter the room. She was surprised and asked, "Why are you back so soon?" Li Mu said, "The county magistrate attached great importance to this case and asked me to protect you closely. I will be by your side for the next 2 days." "That's great." Lu Hanyan smiled and said eagerly, "Then teach me how to cultivate first." Li Mu knew 2 cultivation methods. One was Haotian Taoism, and the other was Buddhism. The Haotian Taoism cultivation method was taught to him by Li Qing. Later on, the half of the Taoist book that Su He gave him had detailed records. The Buddhism cultivation method originated from the scripture Xuandu gave him. That was only an introductory scripture with no follow-up. It wasn't suitable to teach Lu Hanyan. Moreover, without Xuandu's permission, he couldn't teach it to anyone casually. There were no secrets in Taoism cultivation. Some demons and monsters worshiped Taoism and would also cultivate Taoism. Li Qing taught Li Mu, and Li Mu taught Lu Hanyan. There was nothing wrong with that. After making up his mind, Li Mu looked at her and said, "Get on the bed." Lu Hanyan looked at him blankly and asked, "W?" Li Mu added, "Just take off your shoes." Lu Hanyan was a little hesitant. Although it was just taking off her shoes, it wasn't convenient for a woman's feet to be seen by men other than her husband. She looked up at Li Mu and asked, "Can I not take them off?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Cultivation requires the 5 hearts to face the sky. The 5 hearts are the hearts of the feet, palms, and the top of the head. You need to maintain a specific posture. Since it's your first time cultivating, the posture must be correct." Lu Hanyan thought of the nightmares of the past few days and the horror of the female ghost. Her cultivation heart immediately became firm. She silently took off her shoes and sat on the bed. Lu Hanyan's feet were white, slender, and well-proportioned. Her toes were small and round. Li Mu subconsciously took a few more glances. It was the first time Lu Hanyan was barefoot in front of a man. Feeling Li Mu's gaze, her face turned red and she hurriedly covered it with her skirt. Li Mu coughed lightly and looked away. He said, "Lift your left foot to the base of your right thigh. Place your right foot on the base of your left thigh. Make the hearts of your feet face the sky and the palms face the sky. Place them on your legs. Draw chi into your nose and slowly into your abdomen. Keep going down. When you feel stuffy, slowly exhale from your mouth." Li Mu's path of cultivation had been introduced by Li Qing. He had long been familiar with the process of guiding others to enter the sect. While Lu Hanyan was trying to breathe, Li Mu stretched out his index finger and gently touched her forehead. He sent a weak trace of mana into her body. He looked at Lu Hanyan and asked, "Do you feel a warm current?" Lu Hanyan nodded and said in surprise, "It seems like something has entered my body." Li Mu controlled the flow of mana in her body as he said, "Focus your attention and guard your mind. Remember the circulation path of this trace of mana in your body. Try to use your mind to guide it." In order to help her remember the circulation path of her dermic powers, Li Mu let this trace of dermic powers circulate in her body for a quarter of an hour before slowly retracting his finger from Lu Hanyan's forehead. With a pale face, he said, "I left a trace of dermic powers in your body. You just have to circulate it according to the path just now when you're guiding it. When you've cultivated your own dermic powers, I'll teach you how to refine your soul. This trace of mana will not stay in Lu Hanyan's body for too long. If her talent is average or if she is lazy, by the time this trace of mana dissipates, she will still not have cultivated her own mana. If it is still the same after a few times, it means that she has no fate with cultivation. Li Mu will also not be able to help her." Lu Hanyan took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on Li Mu's forehead. She said gratefully, "Thank you." "It's nothing." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I will rest for a while first, then I will go help Wanwan." After teaching Lu Hanyan how to guide the mana, Li Mu went outside. Looking at Wanwan sitting on the swing under the tree, he thought of what happened last night and asked in confusion, "Wanwan, how did you see the female ghost last night?" Last night, the vengeful spirit did not take the initiative to show itself. If Li Mu did not open Lu Hanyan's eyes, she would not have been able to see it. But Li Mu did not do anything to Wanwan, so how did she see it? Speaking of the female ghost last night, Wanwan's small face could not help but turn pale. She jumped down from the swing and tugged on Li Mu's sleeve. She shook her head and said, I also do not know." Li Mu could not figure it out for a moment, so he planned to ask old Wang when he returned to the government office. He stopped thinking about it for the time being and said, "Come to my room with me. I will teach you cultivation. When your cultivation is successful, you can catch ghosts by yourself in the future." Hearing that Li Mu wanted to teach her cultivation, Wanwan followed him to the room eagerly. Li Mu walked to the bed and said, "Take off your shoes and get on the bed." Wanwan was not as shy as Lu Hanyan. She quickly took off her shoes and socks and climbed onto the bed. Li Mu stood in front of the bed and said, "Bend your left foot to the base of your right thigh, then bend your right foot to the base of your left thigh." Wanwan picked up her fat foot. After trying for a while, she said in distress, "I can't bend it over." The movement of the 5 hearts facing the sky required a certain flexibility of the body. It was not easy for the average person to do it. Wanwan's short legs were not as slender as Lu Hanyan's legs. After trying for a long time, she was still unable to cross her legs. Her legs were under her skirt. Li Mu could not help her, so he could only turn around and say, "Try to use more strength. This is a fixed position for cultivation. You must do it." Wanwan hugged her small foot and tried to bend it. She cried, "It hurts." Li Mu comforted her, "Bear with it. It won't hurt in a while." After a while, the little maid said with a sobbing voice, "It still hurts." In this short period of time, Lu Hanyan poked her head outside the door 3 times. Li Mu could not stand it anymore. He walked to the door and said, "Come and help her." After less than an hour, Li Mu walked into the courtyard and let out a long sigh. Teaching them cultivation was more tiring than fighting with demons and ghosts. However, he finally passed a trace of transcendence energy into the master and servant's bodies. Next, they would have to rely on themselves. Teaching Lu Hanyan and Wanwan to cultivate was a piece of cake for Li Mu. Whether they could succeed or not depended on their talent and hard work. Even if they only had a little talent for cultivation, after cultivating for a few days, they would be able to improve their cultivation and have more ability to protect themselves. Li Mu could not always be by their side. 2 weak women, alone outside, if they did not have any tricks up their sleeves, it would be too dangerous. The female ghost that was pestering Lu Hanyan was temporarily guarded by Li Mu in the soul recovering bag. It had a one-way connection with the person behind the case. At this time, the other party had no idea that the female ghost had fallen into Li Mu's hands. After lunch, in order to not arouse the suspicion of the person behind the scenes, Li Mu first let Lu Hanyan go to the shop before he left the house. Although the Zhang County magistrates asked him to protect Lu Hanyan closely, Li Mu still kept a certain distance from her to avoid alerting the enemy. He walked on the street. Zhang Shan and Li Si were eating noodles on the side of the street. They caught a glimpse of Li Mu from afar. Zhang Shan waved to Li Mu and said, "Li Mu, over here." Li Mu walked over. Zhang Shan waved to the stall owner and said, "Boss, another bowl of noodles." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No, I've already eaten at home." Lu Hanyan cooked for lunch. Only the dishes were washed by Li Mu. Zhang Shan asked curiously, "What's the matter? You haven't eaten with us for a long time. Is there someone at home or something?" Li Mu sat down beside him and said, "Cut the crap. Come with me after lunch. There's a case that needs you." Chapter 64. Yunyan Pavilion. Not long after Lu Hanyan returned to the shop, shopkeeper Huang came up and said, "Miss, shopkeeper Ren of the Four Seas bookstore is here." The Four Seas bookstore wanted to collaborate with Yunyan Pavilion to publish strange stories from a Chinese studio, but was rejected by Lu Hanyan. Lu Hanyan stood up and said, "Let him in." A moment later, a middle-aged man came up and looked at Lu Hanyan. He pretended to be surprised and said, "It's only been a few days." "Shopkeeper Lu, why do you look so haggard?" Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "There are many things I need to do in the shop. Maybe it's because I've been too busy these days and haven't had a good rest." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "It's not that I want to say this, but shopkeeper Lu is still young. Although business is important, it's not as important as your health. You can do less business, but you can't let your health deteriorate." Lu Hanyan looked at him and said, "Shopkeeper Ren is right." The middle-aged man smiled again and said, "If Yunyan Pavilion's business is too heavy, my Four Seas bookstore doesn't mind helping shopkeeper Lu." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "This is my Yunyan Pavilion's business. There's no need for shopkeeper Ren to worry." Shopkeeper Ren sighed and said, "I'm just afraid that if shopkeeper Lu continues like this, your body won't be able to take it. If a person is too tired, it's easy for them to have nightmares at night. They dream of evil spirits coming for their lives." Lu Hanyan suddenly looked at him and asked, "You did it?" Shopkeeper Ren shook his head and said, "What do you mean by I did it? I didn't do anything." "Shopkeeper Lu, please don't frame me." Lu Hanyan took a deep breath and looked at shopkeeper Ren again and said, "As long as you can stop me from having those nightmares, I'll agree to your conditions last time. I don't know what evil spirits are." Shopkeeper Ren smiled and said, "However, I think Miss Lu might be too tired, which is why you often have those nightmares. Why don't we, the Four Seas bookstore, help you share some of the pressure? Naturally, you won't have those nightmares." Lu Hanyan looked at him coldly and said, "Things have come to this. If you still want to hide it, then we have nothing to talk about." Looking at him, The smile on shopkeeper Ren's face gradually disappeared. He said mockingly, "So what if I am?" "Shopkeeper Lu, you're new here and don't know the situation in Yangqiu County. Aren't you a little too naive to think that you can get a share of the profits?" Lu Hanyan asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll report it? Do you think I haven't investigated you? You're an outsider with a maid. How long have you been in Yangqiu County? You don't have anyone backing you up. How dare you report this to the authorities?" Shopkeeper Ren curled his lips and said, "Besides, what's the use of reporting to the authorities? Do you have any evidence to prove that I did it?" Lu Hanyan looked at him and suddenly smiled. Shopkeeper Ren's expression froze as he asked, "Why are you laughing?" Lu Hanyan said, "You said something wrong." Shopkeeper Ren asked suspiciously, "What?" Lu Hanyan said, "There's someone backing me up." While Shopkeeper Ren was bewildered, a cold iron chain was wrapped around his neck. Zhang Shan kicked him in the butt and said angrily, "You're rebelling. What's the use of reporting to the authorities? Do you think the yamen is run by your family?" Li Mu held the iron chain and looked at the extremely flustered Shopkeeper Ren. He said calmly, "Take him away." The Four Seas bookstore and Yunyan Pavilion were competitors, so they had a motive to commit the crime. When Shopkeeper Ren admitted that he was involved, Li Mu, Zhang Shan, and Li Si were all present. There were also witnesses. However, this person quibbled on the way there. When he arrived at the court, he flatly denied it. When he was questioned by Zhang County magistrates, he said firmly, "Sir, this commoner has been wronged. This commoner has always been fair and law-abiding. How could I do such a thing?" Zhang County magistrates was expressionless. He said, "Raise your head and look at me." Shopkeeper Ren raised his head and looked at Zhang County magistrates. When their eyes met, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore suddenly froze. At the same time, Li Mu also noticed that Zhang County magistrate's eyes seemed to have turned into a deep pool. With just a glance, his gaze seemed to have sunk into it. He hurriedly looked away. At this moment, Zhang County magistrates looked at Shopkeeper Ren and asked calmly, "The Yunyan Pavilion's shopkeeper has been haunted by evil spirits recently. Was it your doing?" Shopkeeper Ren nodded mechanically. Zhang County magistrates continued to ask, "Why did you do this?" Shopkeeper Ren said, "The Yunyan Pavilion stole our Four Seas bookstore's business. Their shopkeeper is a woman who just came to Yangqiu County not long ago. She has no background, so I wanted to force her to give up a portion of the profits." Who was the one controlling the evil spirits? I found a Taoist priest on the streets and spent 10 taels of silver to ask for his help. Where is the Taoist priest? The Earth Temple in the west of the city. Cultivators were not under the jurisdiction of the government, but if there were any who committed crimes, it would be difficult for them to escape punishment. The imperial court had always had zero tolerance for cultivators who used Taoism to harm others. Those who harmed others' lives would be killed. Those who used evil spirits to harm others to achieve certain goals would be beaten 100 times, crippled of their Taoism, and expelled. Hanja led people straight to the Earth Temple in the west of the city and found a wandering Taoist priest. The Taoist priest was only at the soul refining realm. Hanja sealed his Taoism and brought him to the yamen. After being identified by Shopkeeper Ren, Zhang County magistrates personally crippled his Taoism and destroyed his dantian, cutting off any possibility of him harming others in the future. As for the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore, as the mastermind behind the scenes, he naturally could not escape punishment. After being beaten 50 times, he was barely alive. In addition, the Four Seas bookstore was closed for 3 months and fined 100 taels of silver as compensation to the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. As for the evil spirit, it would be a pity to destroy it. Li Mu simply applied to Zhang County magistrates to send her to the Jinshan Temple. After all, Xuandu loved to entertain ghosts and demons. Li Mu would treat it as returning a favor to him. Shopkeeper Ren was carried away by 2 constables. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and said, "Thank you." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "What are you thanking me for? This case happened in my jurisdiction." Lu Hanyan did not stand on ceremony and said, "Then I'll go back first." Remember to come back for dinner tonight. After Lu Hanyan left, Hanja, who had been paying attention in this direction, came over and asked Li Mu, "Do you know the female shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion?" Li Mu said, "She's my neighbor." Hanja looked at him and asked, "Just your neighbor?" Li Mu asked, "What else could it be?" Hanja asked again, "Is your neighbor married?" Li Mu glanced at him and said, "Why are you asking this?" Hanja probed, "She's so beautiful and she's not married. Don't you have any other thoughts about her?" Li Mu said impatiently, "What are you trying to say?" Hanja said, "I just want to ask, if you had to choose between her and Miss Qing, who would you choose?" Li Mu looked at him in confusion and asked, "Why should I choose?" Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, Hanja touched his chin and fell into deep thought. The best result was, of course, Li Mu and shopkeeper Lu being together. This way, there would no longer be an eyesore between him and Li Qing. But what did he mean by that? Why should I choose? Did he mean that he didn't choose one, or did he want both? In the guard room, old Wang looked at Li Mu and said uncertainly, "You want both?" Li Mu nodded. "I want both." Old Wang looked at the books Li Mu picked out and asked, "These books are all basic knowledge before cultivation. You have no use for them, so what do you want them for?" Li Mu said, "I have other uses for them. Anyway, no one is reading these books. Why don't you lend them to me for a few days? I'll return them to you after a few days." Although Li Mu didn't need these books, Lu Hanyan and Wanwan had just stepped onto the path of cultivation. They still needed to build a foundation and broaden their knowledge. It was unrealistic for Li Mu to explain things about cultivation to them one by one. It was better to give them a few books and let them read by themselves. Old Wang nodded and said, "Okay, remember to return them when you're done." Old Wang was well-read and knowledgeable. Li Mu thought of Wanwan and asked, "By the way, Old Wang, can ordinary people see wraiths?" Chapter 65. Nope. Lao Wang shook his head and said, "Unless the wraith shows itself, or a cultivator opens the third eye for them." Li Mu added, "If the wraith doesn't show itself, then no cultivator opens the third eye for her." Lao Wang looked at him and said, "Then there's only one possibility." Li Mu asked, "What is it?" Lao Wang said, "This person is born with spiritual eyes." Li Mu was stunned. What is born with spiritual eyes? You can understand it as some kind of talent. Lao Wang explained, but this kind of talent is more common in the demon clan. For example, bat demons are born with the ability to attack using sound waves, and those monsters transformed from poisonous insects are very good at using poison. The dragon clan is born with the strength of the middle realm. These can all be attributed to talent. Humans sometimes have this kind of situation. Born with spiritual eyes is equivalent to opening the third eye at all times. It's normal for them to be able to see things that ordinary people can't. Li Mu didn't ask any more questions. He thought about the possibility of Wanwan's natural spiritual eyes. With her courage, she would cry when she saw a female ghost. If she was born with spiritual eyes, why didn't he discover it? Li Mu thought about it again and felt that it was normal for this kind of thing to happen to Wanwan. Although there were demons and ghosts in this world, under the protection of the imperial court, demons and ghosts and humans mostly minded their own business. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to come into contact with these things in their lifetime. Under normal circumstances, spirits and wraith looked like ordinary people. Ghosts were transformed from humans, so they had dignity and beauty. If it wasn't a special situation, who would want to make themselves hideous and terrifying with Wanwan's personality? Even if she really saw a ghost, she probably wouldn't be able to tell. This reminded Li Mu of the first time he met Jiang Wang clan. He only thought of her as an ordinary woman. While Li Mu was thinking, Lao Wang found a book in the corner of the bookshelf. He blew off the thick layer of dust on it and threw it to Li Mu. He said, "There are records about spiritual eyes in this book. Take a look yourself." Lao Wang really had all kinds of books here. Li Mu put the book together with the other books. He left the yamen and bought some talisman paper and cinnabar on the street. After the condensation of the second spirit, he could write a few more talismans, and they were the more practical ones that could expel evil spirits and kill ghosts. These talismans could only be drawn when he needed them. Obviously, there was not enough time, so he had to prepare them in advance and carry them with him. After returning home, Li Mu wrote more than 10 talismans in a row. He only stopped when his mana was almost exhausted. After dinner, he handed 2 talisman exorcism to Yu Han-yun and said, "These 2 talismans have the effect of exorcism. You and Wan should carry them with you. Normal ghosts will not be able to get close to you. You can read the books in my study later. They are all about cultivation. You can understand them." Li Mu didn't give the book about spiritual eyes to her. He planned to study it himself first. Yu Han-yun accepted the talisman. Li Mu asked again, "Is the bit of mana I sent into your body still there?" Yu Han-yun nodded and said, "It's still there." People with average talent often needed several months of guidance to produce the first bit of mana in their body. If they had the help of other cultivators to help them familiarize themselves with the flow of mana, this time could be greatly shortened. Even so, those who were slightly talented still needed the help of other cultivators several times before they could condense their mana. Li Mu had a pure yang body and was extremely talented, so he easily retained the mana that Li Qing sent into his body. Li Mu just checked Wan's body and found that the mana he sent into her body in the morning had already dissipated. He thought that Yu Han-yun would be the same and would need to try a few more times. He didn't expect that the mana in her body had not dissipated yet. Li Mu looked at her and said in surprise, "Give me your hand." Yu Han-yun stretched out her hand. Li Mu held her hand. Yu Han-yun blushed slightly, but she still allowed him to hold her hand. Li Mu sent a trace of her dermic powers into Lu Hanyun's body. After a cycle, she was surprised to find that not only did the dermic powers she had left in Lu Hanyun's body in the morning did not disappear, but instead increased a little. Although it was only a negligible increase, it showed that her talent for cultivation was not inferior to Li Mu's. Yu Han-yun saw his strange expression and asked nervously, "What's wrong?" Li Mu seemed to have thought of something. He looked at her and asked, "What are your birth characters?" Other than marriage discussions, Yu Han-yun couldn't think of any other time to ask about her birth characters. She asked in confusion, "Why are you asking this?" Li Mu said, "Tell me first. This is very important." Yu Han-yun thought for a moment and said, "Icho, XNC, Ding Mao, Gui Mao." Li Mu calculated with his fingers and looked at Yu Han-yun in shock. Li Mu was born in the year of the dragon. His birth characters were Wu Chen, Geng Wu, Bing Wu, Ren Chen. The 4 pillars were pure yang. Yu Han-yun was born in the year of the ox. She was 3 years older than him. Her birth characters were Yi Chou, XNC, Ding Mao, Gui Mao. She was the opposite of Li Mu. The 4 pillars were pure yin. Pure yang, pure yin, body of the 5 elements. The soul and the body were great supplements that even demons and heretical cultivation would covet. It was also an excellent body for cultivation. Li Mu used to think that since he had a pure yang body, his cultivation speed would be as fast as cheating. However, he recently realized that although his cultivation speed was not slow, it was far from the description of a pure yang body in the books. The reason why he could condense 2 souls in such a short time was because he collected the 7 emotions very quickly. His cultivation path was different from others. Li Mu had thought about this question before and quickly found the answer. Although his body was still pure yang, his soul belonged to his previous life. Because of this, his cultivation speed was greatly reduced compared to people whose souls and bodies were pure yang. However, Yu Han-yun was different. She had a complete pure yin body. In terms of normal cultivation speed, even Li Mu could not compare to her. Li Mu looked at Yu Han-yun in a daze. She and Wan, one had a pure yin body and the other was born with spirit eyes. What kind of master and servant were they? Yu Han-yun saw his strange expression and felt a little uneasy. She asked, "Is there a problem?" Li Mu came back to his senses. He never expected that Yu Han-yun would have such a rare body like him. He looked at Yu Han-yun and asked, "Has anyone told you that you have a rare pure yin body?" As soon as he said this, Yu Hanyun's body trembled and her face immediately turned pale. Li Mu was stunned for a moment and asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Hanyun lowered her head and said with a calm expression, "When I was young, father and mother found a fortune teller. The fortune teller said that a pure yang body and a pure yin body would bring calamity to their loved ones. Father and mother thought that I was inauspicious and sold me to the music hall. Although there was no such thing as a pure yang body and a pure yin body, they would easily attract the covetous of evil beings. To a certain extent, it was not wrong to say that they would bring calamity to the people around them. The cause of death of Li Mu's predecessor was probably because of this." He could only comfort Yu Hanyun by saying, "That fortune teller was obviously a Jianghu swindler. Don't take it to heart." Yu Hanyun looked up and smiled. She said, "You don't have to comfort me. So what if I'm a pure yang body? After so many years, haven't I still survived? There is no such thing as a pure yang body. I also have a pure yang body, but no one has ever said that about me." Li Mu took out the book on the basics of cultivation that Li Qing gave him from the study. He turned to a page and said, "She has a pure yin body. Not only is she not a loner, but she is also a genius in cultivation. Take a look for yourself." "Really?" Yu Hanyun took the book and looked at it expectantly. On the yellowed page, there were a few sentences. "People with a pure yang body and a pure yin body have souls that are different from ordinary people's. They are easily coveted by evil beings. If they cultivate, their cultivation speed will be several times faster than ordinary people. A man with a pure yang body and a woman with a pure yin body are a match made in heaven. They can form the great Tao of dual cultivation. Yin and yang combine and complement each other." Yu Hanyun looked up at Li Mu and said suspiciously, "This book? You didn't write it, did you?" Li Mu glanced at the contents of the page and knew that she had misunderstood the latter part of the words. To prevent her from thinking that he was hinting at something, Li Mu shook his head and said, "Don't misunderstand. You are not my type." Chapter 66. Li Mu had some admiration for Lu Hanyan. He admired her independence and self-improvement as a woman. She had traveled thousands of miles from Zhongjun with a servant girl, and in such a short period of time, she had expanded the Yunyan Pavilion to its current scale. Other than admiration, he also craved for her. Of course, it wasn't her body, but her cooking skills. Li Mu didn't deny that Lu Hanyan was a very outstanding woman in every aspect. Appearance, figure, cooking skills, wealth, personality. There were probably countless men who dreamed of marrying her. However, to Li Mu, this kind of person was fine as a friend. As a wife, he liked the kind of gentle, considerate, cute, obedient girls who knew how to act coquettishly and take care of others. He didn't like overly strong girls. As a man, he preferred to protect his woman, not be protected by a woman or be kept by a woman. Even if Lu Hanyan had a pure yin body and was a natural match for him, feelings were more important than one's constitution. "No, I'm not your type?" Even if Lu Hanyan had never thought of developing a relationship with Li Mu, hearing this answer from his mouth was still a blow. As a woman, she had a figure, looks, cooking skills, and money. What reason did he have to not like her? She glanced at Li Mu and asked unhappily, "Then what kind of woman do you like?" In order to reassure Lu Hanyan, Li Mu spoke the truth: cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of others. As for age, it's best if she's younger than me, cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of others. Lu Hanyan felt that she fit this description very well. It was just that she was older than him by 3 years, but so what if she was older by 3 years? As the saying goes, a woman 3 years older than him would have a gold bar. Moreover, if he had her, it wouldn't be just a gold bar, but a pile of gold bars. It would be enough for him to live a carefree life for the rest of his life. Was he looking down on her age? This caused her to be instantly enraged. It wasn't that she liked Li Mu. It was just that she was a woman who had absolute confidence in her looks, figure, and other conditions. Yet, she was ignored and disdained by a man, which made it difficult for her to accept. She opened her mouth and was about to refute when she suddenly thought of something. She looked at Wanwan, who was swinging under the tree in the yard. Cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of people. She's a little younger than you. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said warily, "Are you thinking about Wanwan?" If Lu Hanyan hadn't mentioned it, Li Mu wouldn't have thought about it. After her reminder, Li Mu suddenly realized that if Wanwan was 2 years older, wouldn't she be his ideal type? No wonder he liked Wanwan so much and always treated her well. He put away these thoughts and shook his head at Lu Hanyan, saying, "If I'm unlucky, I only have a few months left to live. How would I have the time to think about these things?" Li Mu successfully changed Lu Hanyan's mind. She asked, "Aren't you a cultivator? Don't tell me you can't treat your illness?" To be exact, what I'm suffering from is not an illness. Since Lu Hanyan had also stepped onto the path of cultivation, the things that were inconvenient to talk to her in detail before could be explained now. Deciding to be honest with her, Li Mu continued, "I stepped onto the path of cultivation in order to survive. Humans have 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. 2 months ago, my 7 physical souls were taken away by a demon. Only by condensing 4 physical souls within half a year can I have a chance to survive." Lu Hanyan listened carefully and asked, "Then how many physical souls have you condensed now?" Li Mu answered, 2 physical souls. Lu Hanyan hurriedly said, "Then hurry up and condense the other 2 physical souls. Condensing the physical souls is not that simple." Li Mu took the opportunity to teach Lu Hanyan about the path of cultivation. He slowly said, "Humans are born with the 7 physical souls. The 7 physical souls are born from the 7 emotions of happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, love, evil, and desire. If you want to condense the 7 physical souls again, you have to accumulate a large amount of the 7 emotions. These 7 emotions need to be generated by others. This is easier said than done, accumulating the 7 emotions." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and said in realization, "I understand now. The reason why you told stories in the tea house and stopped at the most interesting part every time was to collect the anger of the customers?" Li Mu nodded. Lu Hanyan continued to ask, "Then the reason why you deliberately barbecued meat in the courtyard last time was actually to make me angry and then take away my anger?" Li Mu smiled awkwardly and explained, "I also wanted to survive. You should understand this, right?" Lu Hanyan glared at him but did not pursue the matter. She thought of something else and asked, "You wanted to play Liang Shanbua because you wanted to absorb the sadness of the customers, right?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Lu Hanyan looked at him with a resentful gaze and said, "You even said that it was your dream." "A man's mouth is a liar," Li Mu said embarrassedly. "I had no choice at the time." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and continued to ask, "Happiness, anger, sorrow, and fear are easy to obtain. What about love and desire?" This was also Li Mu's headache. He said helplessly, "Let's first condense the first 4 physical souls and live for half a year." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "I will personally go to the theater and ask them to change the script as soon as possible." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you." Lu Hanyan waved her hand. "What are you thanking me for? I haven't thanked you for teaching me cultivation yet." Speaking of cultivation, Li Mu thought of something and his expression became serious. He said, "There is something you must be careful about." Seeing his serious expression, Lu Hanyan also became serious. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu said, "The bodies of pure yin and pure yang are indeed suitable for cultivation, but our souls and bodies are also great nourishment for demonic ghosts and evil creatures. Not only are they easy to attract demonic ghosts and evil creatures, they will also attract the covetous eyes of heretical cultivation. In the future, you must never tell anyone about your birth date and horoscope, let alone let anyone know that you have a body of pure yin." Lu Hanyan nodded and said solemnly, "I understand. The bodies of pure yang, pure yin, and 5 elements could not be seen from the outside, unless someone knew their birth date and horoscope, or came into close contact with evil creatures that were more sensitive to these types of bodies." That night in the Zhang family village, the zombie did not chase after Hanja and only chased after Li Mu because of this reason. Lu Hanyan closed the introductory book and said, Let me have a look at this book. This book could help her understand more about cultivation. Li Mu nodded and said, Take it. Take the other books in the study as well. Remember to return them to me when you're done. Although this book was no longer of any use to Li Mu, it was still a gift from Li Qing. It would not be good to give it to someone else. Lu Hanyan returned home and put the book under her pillow. She said to her servant girl, Woman, go to the opera house and tell the masters to write the script for Transforming into Butterflies in 3 days. Their wages for this month will be doubled. Ren residence. The Four Seas bookstore was closed for 3 months as a punishment and had to pay 100 taels of silver to the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. The shopkeeper was also beaten 50 times. In the Ren residence, the servants looked worried. In a room in the inner courtyard, shopkeeper Ren's wails could be heard. A young man walked into the room. When shopkeeper Ren saw him, he immediately said, You have to avenge father. The young man's face darkened. He said, Didn't I tell you to do business honestly and not engage in these crooked practices? Do you really think those cultivators in the yamen are useless? Shopkeeper Ren said regretfully, I thought that woman was new here and did not have any background. Who would have thought that she had someone backing her? All right, let's forget about this matter. Stay at home and recuperate. Don't provoke the yamen again. The young man walked to the bed, stretched out his palm, and placed it on shopkeeper Ren's back. A white light flashed on his palm. Shopkeeper Ren climbed up from the bed and said in surprise, It doesn't hurt anymore. The young man said faintly, I've only eliminated your pain. You still need to recuperate. Stay at home and don't think about money all the time. When I'm successful in my cultivation, I'll have as much money as I want. Shopkeeper Ren lay back on the bed and said, Cultivate well with your master. When your cultivation is successful and you earn a lot of money, buy all the bookstores in Yangqiu County. The young man walked out of the room and went to the deepest courtyard of the Ren residence. He said to the 2 servants at the door, I want to cultivate in peace. If it's not a big matter, don't disturb me. Chapter 67. Li Mu was practicing his swordsmanship in the yard. Lu Hanyan put a thin book on the stone table in the yard and said, This is the script of Transforming into Butterflies. Take some time to read it and memorize the lines as soon as possible. Li Mu put down his sword and said in surprise, So fast. One stood aside and said, Of course it's fast. In order to urge them to finish the script, Miss didn't sleep for 2 nights in a row. Li Mu looked up and saw that Lu Hanyan's originally delicate face was a little haggard at the moment. Her slumbering was more obvious than 2 days ago. He was a little touched. He held his sword with both hands and said, I can't thank you enough. I will repay you in the future if I have the chance. Lu Hanyan rolled her eyes at him and said, Don't talk about the future. Teach me how to draw talismans now. After I learn how to draw talismans, I can draw youthful talismans by myself. At this time, only 2 days had passed since Li Mu taught Lu Hanyan how to cultivate. Last night, with the help of Li Mu, she successfully refined the first soul. In order to condense the soul, Li Mu had worked hard to do good deeds like lay foam. He helped the old lady cross the road, cut Zhang Shan's leeks, and helped Lin Wan get justice. He collected joy everywhere and finally condensed the first soul. Lu Hanyan only took 2 days to do what Li Mu could do in a month. Of course, it was because Li Mu gave her the remaining strength of the tiger demon's soul from the last time he condensed the soul. The talent of the pure Yin body in cultivation played a greater role. Of course, without the courage of a demon, she would not have been able to refine the second soul so quickly. Lu Hanyan remembered the feeling of rapid improvement in cultivation last night. She couldn't help but lick her lips. She looked at Li Mu and asked, Did you put anything into my body last night? No, not a drop. Li Mu looked at her and said seriously, You have to be down to earth when you cultivate. Don't always think about taking shortcuts. Otherwise, in the end, if you don't harm others, you will harm yourself. In terms of cultivation, Lu Hanyan only obeyed Li Mu. After being reprimanded by him, she lowered her head and whispered, I understand. After refining the first soul, Lu Hanyan's mana could already write the two most basic Fu Lu talismans. One was the soul-locking talisman, and the other was the youth-retaining talisman. Li Mu first let her copy the runes of the two talismans. Being able to draw the runes in one go was the first step to writing talismans. Lu Hanyan was proficient in many musical instruments and had a pair of skillful hands. Painting and calligraphy were not difficult for her. The difficulty of writing talismans was that she had to eliminate all distracting thoughts and pour her mana into the runes. For beginners, it was impossible to successfully write talismans without a long period of practice. Even for those with a little talent, it would take 10 days to half a month to master it. For those with mediocre talent, it was common for them to practice for several months before they could master it. Lu Hanyan had already failed several times. Her mana was overdrawn and her face was pale, but she was still persevering. Li Mu could see the stubbornness in her personality from the matter of writing talismans. Once she set her mind on something, she would definitely not turn back even if she hit a wall. Li Mu looked at her and comforted, "Why don't you try again tomorrow?" Lu Hanyan's expression was firm and said, "I can definitely do it." "I'm so close." Li Mu was worried that she would be exhausted if she continued to persevere, so he took the brush from her hand and said, "Recite with me. Your heart is as clear as ice. Even if the sky collapses, you won't be alarmed." After teaching Lu Hanyan, Li Mu reminded her again, "Just remember this technique. Don't tell anyone else." The art of tranquility did not belong to the category of Taoist techniques, but it was very effective in situations where one needed to calm down and concentrate. After learning the art of tranquility, Lu Hanyan only failed once before she successfully drew a face-retaining talisman. In this world, the art of tranquility was a secret technique that only Li Mu knew. It was different from the art of leading Yin. If it wasn't for the fact that Lu Hanyan stayed up late to help him write the script, Li Mu wouldn't be so generous as to teach her. Using sincerity to exchange for sincerity, this was what Li Si taught Li Mu. Although Li Si said that it was to pick up girls, it could be used in other situations as well. Speaking of which, he couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. Since he taught it to Lu Hanyan, he should find a chance to teach it to Li Qing as well. Although Lu Hanyan was also kind to him, it wasn't 10 to 20% of Li Qing's kindness to him. And from Li Qing, Li Mu had never asked for anything in return. When Li Mu found Li Qing in the guard room, she was cultivating with her eyes closed. The lower three realms of cultivation were soul refining, soul condensing, and spirit concentrating. Soul refining was to refine the 7 souls, allowing the cultivator to completely control the body. Soul condensing was actually soul refining. It was the process of the cultivator gradually controlling the 3 souls. In this realm, the cultivator's soul gradually grew stronger and could freely enter and leave the body. Moreover, when the soul was in the state of leaving the body, it could still retain part of its strength. Spirit concentrating was the last realm of the lower 3 realms of cultivation. At this realm, the cultivator's 3 souls merged into one and completely transformed into the primordial spirit. Even if the body died, the primordial spirit could leave the body and enter a new body to be reborn. As long as the primordial spirit was not destroyed, the cultivator would not truly die. For cultivators in the spirit concentrating realm, their cultivation was all in the primordial spirit. Even if the body died and only the primordial spirit was left, their strength would not be weakened too much. This was similar to monsters in human form. Although the lizard spirit and the tiger spirit's body died, their souls were still strong. However, after they turned into souls, they would be more afraid of thunder arts and Buddha's light. Li Mu walked into the guard room. Li Qing slowly opened her eyes and asked, "Did something happen in your cultivation?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I came across a spell by chance. It can clear the heart and restrain the mind. When I use it when I'm writing talismans, it can stabilize the mind and increase the success rate of writing talismans." He handed a piece of paper to Li Qing and said, "This is the spell." Li Qing did not take it. She shook her head and said, "There are many spells of calming the heart and clearing the heart in Taoism, but none of them have this effect. Even in the 6 ancestral courts, this spell can be called a top-notch spell. It's very precious. I can't accept it. Li Mu put the paper on the table in front of Li Qing and said, "Boss taught me cultivation, saved my life, and gave me a book and a sword. What's this little spell?" Li Mu had many Taoist spells and scriptures. The clear heart spell was the least effective among them. It was not that Li Mu did not want to give her something good. With Li Qing's kindness to him, it was not too much to ask Li Mu to repay her with his body. It was just that Li Mu himself had not figured out the 9 words mantra. If he took it out like this, he would not even be able to come up with an excuse. Although this little clear heart spell could not repay Li Qing's kindness, they lived under the same roof every day and had many opportunities to interact. In the future, there would be plenty of opportunities to slowly repay her. After all, the future was long. Putting the paper on the table, Li Mu smiled at Li Qing and said, "Boss, continue cultivating. I'm going out to patrol. Wait a moment." Li Qing glanced at the paper on the table and said nothing. She only looked at Li Mu and asked, "You've already condensed corpse dog and concealed arrow. Which one are you going to condense next?" Li Mu embarrassedly said, "Sparrow shade." Li Qing continued to ask, "Have you thought about how to collect grief?" Li Mu nodded and told her his idea. "That's actually a good idea. Only you could think of it." Li Qing smiled and said, "Go. I'll leave the matters of the yamen to Zhang Shan and Li Si. You just need to focus on condensing the soul." Li Mu stood at the door and did not immediately walk out. Li Qing looked at Li Mu standing at the door and asked, "Is there something else?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Boss, you look really good when you smile. You should smile more often." Li Qing froze for a moment. Then her gaze wandered for a moment and she said, "Go on patrol." Zhang Shan, who had just returned from his patrol and was preparing to rest in the duty room, stood outside the door, his eyes wide open. A moment later, on the Weiyang Street, he wrapped his arm around Li Mu's shoulder and said in shock, "Li Mu, are you crazy? You even dare to tease the boss. Aren't you afraid that the boss will get angry?" Li Si walked by his side and said, "A woman will never get angry because you praise her beauty." Zhang Shan asked in return, "Is the boss an ordinary woman?" Li Si looked at him and said, "Immortals are also women." Li Si spoke of great principles, but Li Mu had no choice but to accept it. Just now, he had blurted out what was on his mind on a whim. He did not know if she would get angry. When they reached the door of the Yunyan Pavilion, Li Mu temporarily put aside his thoughts about Li Qing and focused on condensing the sparrow shade. For him, what he needed to condense was not just the third soul. There was also the dignity of a man. Chapter 68. Li Mu had already memorized the script of transforming into a butterfly with the help of the clear mind technique. Lu Hanyan asked him to come to the theater to rehearse when he was free. 1 minute on stage was 10 years of practice off stage. Before officially going on stage, everyone had to memorize the script thoroughly and rehearse it in advance without any mistakes. Only then could they walk from behind the scenes to the front of the stage. When shopkeeper Huang saw Li Mu, he ran over eagerly and said, "Young master, you're here. Please change into your costume first. We'll start rehearsing in a while." Li Mu needed the audience to feel sad for him. Naturally, the more miserable the character he played, the better. Who else could he choose to play Liang Shanbo? However, in fact, he wasn't very sure if he could collect sadness in this way. If he couldn't, he would let Li Qing break his legs and pretend to be a beggar. He would beg at the city gate. A man should be more ruthless to himself. Survival was always the first priority. Dignity and other things could be abandoned in the face of life. Because it was just a rehearsal, Li Mu changed into his costume and didn't put on makeup. He sat backstage. After a while, he saw shopkeeper Huang coming over with another handsome scholar in costume. Li Mu looked at the handsome scholar's face. No matter how he looked at it, it was familiar. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. The handsome scholar crossed his arms and asked, "What's wrong? You don't recognize me?" Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan and said in surprise, Why are you dressed like this? Because I'm acting in a heroic stage. Lu Hanyan looked at him proudly and asked, How is it? Do I look like you? Needless to say, Lu Hanyan was beautiful. After dressing up as a man, she immediately became a heroic young man. If she walked on the street, she would probably attract a lot of ignorant girls. That sounds like it, Li Mu nodded, then he thought of something and asked, Wait, do you know how to act? As the female lead of Liangzhu, Zhu Yingtai had a lot of scenes and lines in the drama. If she screwed up, she would just lose a few customers. However, to Li Mu, he would lose a bunch of leaks. No, he would lose the hope of condensing the sparrow shade and becoming a real man. This was not something for her to play with. Lu Hanyan glanced at him and said, If you don't believe me, I can arrange for someone else to act in Yingtai. Although Auntie Wang is in her 50s, her basic skills are solid. Acting as a young woman in her 20s shouldn't be a problem. Li Mu said without hesitation, Of course I believe you. Liangzhu was a couple in the drama. Although there weren't any restricted scenes, it was inevitable for them to hold hands and hug. If he had to choose between Auntie Wang and Lu Hanyan, Li Mu would still choose her. The only thing he was worried about was that Zhu Yingtai was going to dress up as a man. If he let Li Qing act, she wouldn't need any props and would just wear a loose costume. No one would be able to tell. However, Lu Hanyan was different. Unless the audience was blind, they would be able to tell at a glance. Li Mu subconsciously looked at her and noticed that her originally bulging chest had become flat. After being stunned for a moment, he couldn't help but ask, Don't you feel uncomfortable from being strangled? Lu Hanyan lowered her head and said in embarrassment, It's none of your business. Li Mu was also worried that she would hurt herself. It wouldn't be good if she hurt her body in order to satisfy her desire for acting. However, since Lu Hanyan didn't care, he couldn't say anything more. He said, Since you're ready, let's start rehearsing. While the two were rehearsing, on the other side of the theater, several actors gathered there and looked at the two figures not far away. One of them was puzzled and said, Transforming into butterflies is such a good script. Why did you find a newcomer to act as the lead? Isn't this messing around? The person next to him looked at him and said, Yeah, I thought you would act as Liang Shanbua. This is a rare opportunity to show your face. I don't know what you're thinking. That person listened to Li Mu's clumsy lines and sighed. He said, I'm really not convinced. How am I not better than him? Lu Hanyan was a professional. Not only was she proficient in musical instruments, but she was also good at singing. Li Mu was completely a layman. After the two of them rehearsed their lines, Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, You can't go on stage directly like this. A real actor knows how to arouse the emotions of the guests. When they act as the bad guys, they can make the guests hate them so much that they even forget that this is acting and rush to the stage to curse. When they act as the good guys, they can gain the sympathy of the guests and make the guests cry for them. Your acting is too stiff. Even if you act as Liang Shanbua, you can't move the guests and get their grief. Grief was a very important thing. Li Mu also became serious and said, I'll think about it carefully. Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, A good actor takes 10 years to become a beginner, 20 years to become an actor, and 30 to 50 years to become a master. In this line, without the guidance of a master, it's difficult to understand anything. Li Mu asked, Is there any quick way? There's no quick way to improve your acting skills. You can only practice hard. Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and said, Come to my room tonight. We'll rehearse our lines as many times as possible. On the other side of the theater building, the young man just now lowered his head and said, I'm convinced. Li Mu thought that he could gain the grief of the guests by acting as Liang Shanbua. I'm a character in a play. What do you mean? You can hypnotize yourself to forget Li Mu, forget your identity as a bailiff, and think that you're a character in a play. Once you've really deceived yourself, you'll really be a character in a play, Suhi explained. She looked at Li Mu and asked, This is a type of illusion technique. Do you want to learn it? Li Mu swallowed his saliva and said, Yes. Suhi crossed her arms in front of her chest. Call me sister and I'll teach you. It was just calling her sister. As long as he could gather grief and condense the sparrow Een, Li Mu would agree without hesitation even if he called her wife, let alone sister. He was secretly delighted. Looking at Su He, he blurted out, wife. Chapter 69. Su He was stunned and asked, what? She tilted her head and looked at Li Mu. Wife. But he was too excited just now and made a mistake. Li Mu's face turned red and he quickly said, I'm sorry, I called you wrongly. Miss Su, Sister Su, please. Su He glanced at him and continued, illusion is a spell to bewitch people. Not only can it be used to bewitch others, but it can also be used to bewitch oneself. Bewitching people was a type of ghost spell. In the ghost stories on the market, there were often scenes of scholars being bewitched by female ghosts and sucked dry their yang energy and blood essence. The difference was that Li Mu was bewitching himself. He knew the story of Liang Zhu. As long as he hypnotized himself and told himself that he was Liang Shanbo, he could naturally immerse himself in Liang Zhu's situation and become the character itself, not just a simple performance. Li Mu used the method Su He taught him. After failing several times, he finally found the trick and could easily enter the plot. Thank you, Sister Su. Li Mu clasped his fist and said, when I condense the third soul, I will thank you properly. But Su He spat and asked, the third soul is the sparrow Een. After you condense the sparrow Een, how are you going to thank me? Of course it's to cook. Li Mu realized the loophole in his words and quickly explained, next time, what do you want to eat? Just tell me, I will definitely bring it for you. Su He rolled her eyes at him and said with some regret, I really want to see how you act on the stage. Unfortunately what? Li Mu said in surprise, you can go and watch. I will save a good seat for you. Su He was already a ghost cultivator and not a low-level ghost. Even if she wandered in the human world, as long as she didn't take the initiative to harm people, the government wouldn't provoke her. I won't go. Su He faintly smiled and gave her a meaningful look. She said, I hope you can quickly condense the sparrow's Een and become a true man who can support the heavens and earth. Li Mu packed up the food box and said, then I'm leaving. I'll come to see you another day. Su He suddenly called out to him. Is there anything else? Li Mu turned around and asked. Su He smiled sweetly at him and said, you gave me strange stories from a Chinese studio and called me your wife. If you really have any thoughts about me, why don't I help you become a ghost cultivator? Then you can. Li Mu knew that she was teasing him out of habit, so he said indifferently, if one day I really die and my soul doesn't disperse, I'll come to Clearwater Bay to accompany you. Every time he came to Su He's place, he would gain something. Li Mu decided to come here more often in the future. On his way back from Clearwater Bay, he saw Lu Hanyan pacing back and forth in front of the gate. Lu Hanyan looked at the food box in his hand and asked in confusion, where did you go? Li Mu said, I went to visit a friend. Lu Hanyan didn't ask any more questions. She said, it's good that you're back. Let's continue practicing. The sooner we finish practicing, the sooner we can go on stage. The sooner you can escape from danger. Lu Hanyan seemed to be even more anxious than him about condensing the soul. Li Mu went home and changed his clothes, then practiced with her in the courtyard. Lu Hanyan quickly entered the role of Zhu Yingtai. She held his hand and turned her head to the side. She said sadly, Brother Liang, Yingtai can't marry you in this life. We can only wait for the next life to be together. Li Mu used the art of charm on himself and turned into Liang Shanhua. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. He said sadly, the world is ruthless, the world is rude. So be it. The sedan will carry your Ma family home. The autumn wind will send me to the Yellow Springs. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu in a daze. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. It wasn't that she forgot her lines. It was just that in one night, Li Mu's acting had changed dramatically. Before, his lines were still a bit stiff and his performance was a bit exaggerated. But now, his lines were smooth and his movements were skillful. He was even better than those old masters who had decades of experience. Lu Hanyan almost thought that he was Liang Shanhua. Li Mu finally got into the mood, but he was interrupted by Lu Hanyan's pause. He came out of the art of charm and asked her, "What's wrong?" Lu Hanyan looked up at him and said in surprise, "It's only been one night. How did you improve so much?" Li Mu said, "Maybe last night I realized the essence of acting." Lu Hanyan was puzzled. "What is it?" Li Mu explained, "When I'm not acting Liang Shanbua, I'm showing the real Liang Shanbua in front of everyone. There's no trace of acting. Naturally, it won't make people feel stiff. Everyone knows this, but it's not that easy to do." Lu Hanyan looked at him with an inexplicable gaze. She said, "Li Mu, you're really a genius. It's a pity that you're not an actor. Li Mu's dream was to become a real man, not an actor." He shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this. Let's continue." The people of Yangqiu County didn't have many entertainment activities on a daily basis. Those who had read books and knew a few words, when they were bored, they could read all kinds of stories and novels to comfort their hearts. Most people could only drink tea, listen to stories or songs. Only those who lived a luxurious life were willing to spend a few more copper coins to go to the opera house to listen to opera. A group of guests walked in from outside the Yunyan Pavilion's opera house. The opera house released a new play today called Transforming into a Butterfly. Because the story of Transforming into a Butterfly had been popular in the tea house for a while, and later in the bookstore, most of the people of Yangqiu County had heard about it from others even if they hadn't read it. Before releasing Transforming into a Butterfly, the opera house had done publicity a few days in advance. Many people who had heard the story of Transforming into a Butterfly had bought tickets a few days in advance, waiting to see the first performance of the new play. Two pitiful people. Why didn't they have a good ending? That Ma family is really a good-for-nothing. They're always trying to break up a couple. Liang Zhu transforms into a butterfly. It makes my heart ache. Even though they already knew the content of the story, the feelings generated from hearing it and seeing it were completely different. The actors acted out this poignant love story vividly, incisively and vividly. When they saw Uncle Shanbua die of illness, Ingtai jump into the grave on the way to her wedding, and the two turn into butterflies and fly away, their hearts were filled with deep sorrow. Some of the more emotional onlookers even shed tears. The curtains slowly pulled down, and the first performance of Transforming into a Butterfly came to an end. The audience sat below the stage. They were infected by the poignant sadness and shed tears of sadness. Li Mu stood on the stage, absorbing the endless sadness. He couldn't stop smiling. His idea was right. If he told the story of Liang Zhu purely as a story, he wouldn't be able to absorb other people's sadness. However, if he transformed into Uncle Liang himself and used his superb acting skills to let the audience put themselves in the situation and think that he was Uncle Liang himself, he would naturally be able to absorb other people's emotions. Appropriately guiding other people's emotions was cultivation. Excessive plundering was harvesting. After countless experiments, Li Mu had found a balance. He could ensure that he didn't cause any harm to those people's bodies when he needed it. This way, as the number of guests increased, he would only need 10 days at most to accumulate enough sadness to condense the sparrow shade in one fell swoop. Transforming into a Butterfly was a popular story in Yangqiu County. After Yunyan Pavilion moved it to the stage, guests flocked to it. Even though Yunyan Pavilion arranged 2 performances a day, it couldn't satisfy all the guests' needs. It wasn't until 10 days later when most people had watched Transforming into a Butterfly once or even twice that the number of guests in the theater gradually decreased. Early morning. Li Mu sprung up from the bed and subconsciously reached into the quilt. At this moment he had the urge to cry. In these 10 days he had asked for leave from Li Qing and performed 2 performances a day with Lu Hanyan, absorbing the emotions of hundreds and thousands of people. Chapter 70. In less than 3 months, Li Mu had already condensed 3 spirits. 4 of the 7 spirits, within half a year, he would not die because of the decay of the body. Now Li Mu was 1 spirit away, and he would be able to completely break away from the Taoist priest's half-a-year prophecy. The first 3 spirits had already been condensed. The last 4 spirits were related to fear, love, evil, and lust. Li Mu carefully thought about it, and first eliminated love and lust. Condensing a spirit required a huge amount of emotions, at least hundreds or even thousands of people. Even if Li Mu was confident in his face, it was impossible to make so many women fall in love with him at the same time. Reducing the quantity and increasing the quality was a good idea. If there was an assembled gods practitioner who loved him to death and was willing to take the initiative to offer love, then with just one person within 3 to 5 days, Li Mu could successfully condense a spirit. But a female assembled gods practitioner was not so easy to find. Li Mu knew a woman with this level of cultivation, Li Qing, and she was wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. With a pure heart and few desires, it was impossible for her to have such feelings for him. Moreover, love cannot be forced. This path was basically impossible. As for lust, it gave Li Mu an even bigger headache. Until now, he had only seen it on Lu Hanyan, and it was only that one time he could not be naked in front of her every day. Thinking of this, Li Mu's mind suddenly flashed. Since he could not directly capture the heart of a female assembled gods practitioner, why not cultivate one himself? Lu Hanyan had a pure Yin body. Her cultivation speed was astonishing. If he could make her fall in love with him early, when she reached assembled gods, wouldn't he be able to harvest both love and lust? Sitting opposite Li Mu eating breakfast, Lu Hanyan suddenly sensed something, raised her head to look at Li Mu and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Li Mu forgot that Lu Hanyan had already condensed her first soul. Her perception was amazing. He immediately looked away and focused on eating. At the same time, he also dispelled his previous thoughts. Raising someone was too shameful. If Lu Hanyan knew what he was thinking, the first thing she would do after concentrating would be to fight Li Mu to the death. For the time being, there was no way to harvest fear in large quantities. Li Mu once thought that since he could collect sadness through acting, he could also collect evil feelings if he played a character full of evil and hateful. However, by using the art of seduction to immerse himself in the role, Li Mu was experiencing Liang Shanbua's life over and over again. The audience was sad, but Li Mu was even sadder. After each performance, Li Mu needed to use the clear heart art to adjust for a long time before he could recover from that state. If it weren't for his determination to condense the sparrow shade, he probably wouldn't have been able to last 10 days. Another important point was that when he was acting, he always told himself that he was Liang Shanbua, that Zhu Yingtai was the woman he liked, and that Lu Hanyan was Zhu Yingtai in the play. After doing this many times, Li Mu would occasionally have some kind of impulse when he was with Lu Hanyan outside the play. If he used this method to play someone else, Li Mu was worried that he would really have schizophrenia and be unable to distinguish between the play and the play. At that time, although the 7 souls would be condensed, he would also go crazy. After breakfast, Li Mu slowly walked to the county government. In the past 10 days, in order to collect sadness, he had been at the theater and hadn't gone to the government office even once. If he didn't go now, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to suppress Li Qing. In the government office, Constable Zhou first helped Li Mu cancel his leave and said, "I heard from Miss Qing that you're sick. How are you? Are you feeling better?" "Much better." Li Mu smiled and didn't say much. He asked, "Where's the boss?" "Miss Qing and the others just left the government office. You should be able to catch up with them now." Constable Zhou shook his head and said, "Recently, Yangqiu County is really not peaceful. First, there were zombies. Yesterday, there was a strange murder outside the city. Miss Qing and Hanj brought people to investigate the case. Li Qing, Zhang Shan, and Li Si were not there. Li Mu was bored to be on duty alone. He asked Constable Zhou about the direction they left in and then used the light body skill to chase after them. Li Mu chased all the way out of the county, but he didn't catch up with Li Qing and Hanja. Instead, he caught up with Zhang Shan, Li Si, and 2 other constables first. Zhang Shan was in the midst of jogging, panting heavily. Hearing the commotion behind him, he turned around and asked, "Li Mu, what have you been up to these past few days?" Li Mu asked, "Where's the boss?" Zhang Shan pointed ahead and said, "In front." They walked too fast. We couldn't catch up. Li Mu didn't go with Zhang Shan and the others. His figure flashed a few times and disappeared from their sight. Zhang Shan sighed and said, "Ever since Li Mu followed the boss to cultivate, he's become more and more powerful. The gap between us and him is getting bigger and bigger." Li Si looked ahead and said, "Don't you feel that Li Mu has changed a lot recently?" Zhang Shan nodded and said, "He has changed a lot. He has become bolder. In the past, he was even more timid than me. Now he dares to fight zombies. Do you think that after a person dies once, they really get over it?" Li Si glanced at him and said, "I haven't died before. How would I know?" Li Mu ran for a while and saw two figures in front of him from afar. Li Qing and Han just stood on the mountain path. Two corpses were placed on the side of the mountain path. Hanja glanced at Li Mu and looked away. Li Qing bent down and checked the two corpses. She said, "Judging from the wounds, it should be done by demons." Li Mu walked forward and found that the two corpses were male. One was about 40 years old and the other looked only 20 years old. Their necks were bitten off by something and their blood was sucked dry. At first glance, it was obvious that it was done by demons. Li Qing stood up and asked, "Have you investigated the identity of the deceased?" Hanja said, "It's been investigated clearly. They are the father and son of a hunter in this mountain. 2 days ago, they went hunting in the mountain. This morning, their bodies were found by a woodcutter who immediately came to the county office to report the case." Li Qing thought for a moment and asked, "Has the woodcutter investigated it?" Hanja nodded and said, "I checked with a magic item. There is no problem." He turned to look at the two corpses on the ground and said, "There is no trace of the demon at the scene. How should we investigate it? When the county government investigated a case, there must be clues. For example, in the case of the weasel, it could be easily tracked down with a fulu based on the hair it left at the scene. In the case of the zombie in Zhang village, as long as one knew the habits of the zombie, they could also wait for the zombie to walk into the trap. There was no clue to investigate such a case without any clues. We can only start by investigating the nearby demons." Li Qing took out a demon-seeking talisman and threw it into the air. The fulu floated in the air, swaying left and right. After a while, it floated down again. Hanja shook his head and said, "There is no response from the demon-seeking talisman. There is no demon within a radius of 5 kilometers. It seems that the demon has already run away." Taoism had many magical spells that could be used in the process of investigating a case. For example, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore. Even if he had denied it before, after being checked by the Zhang County magistrates, he still told the truth. According to the clues left at the scene of the crime, using the fulu or magic to find the murderer was a common method to solve a case. Even so, the county government still couldn't solve most of the cases every year. Li Mu's gaze swept past the two corpses. Soon, he shifted his gaze back with a doubtful look on his face. His heavenly eye could see through the 7 spirits of people. He couldn't see through Li Qing and Hanja because they had already refined the 7 spirits. There was no reason why they couldn't see through these 2 ordinary people. The only possibility was that the 7 spirits of these 2 corpses had already dissipated. After a person died, the 3 spiritual souls would dissipate immediately. However, it would take 7 days for the 7 spirits to dissipate. Even if the hunters had been killed for 2 days, there should be at least 5 spirits left. However, when Li Mu checked with his heavenly eye, he found that there was not a single spirit left in the 2. He thought for a moment and looked at Li Qing. He asked, "Boss, when a demon sucks the essence and blood of a human, will it also suck away the 7 spirits?" Li Qing shook her head and said, "No, the 7 spirits belong to the physical body. If a low-level demon wants to obtain the spirit of a human, it will have to eat the human as blood food." Li Mu pointed at the 2 corpses and asked in confusion, "Then why are there 7 spirits gone?" Li Qing looked at him and asked in confusion, "You can see the 7 spirits of a human?" The 7 spirits were different from the 3 spiritual souls. Even a cultivator in the three middle realms might not be able to see through them at a glance. With Li Qing's cultivation in the spirit realm, she couldn't do this. Li Mu nodded and said, I once learned a magical ability by accident. It can see through a person's 3 spiritual souls and 7 spirits. He glanced at Hanja and walked to Li Qing's side. He whispered a few words in her ear. Hanja really wanted to know what this magical ability was, but Li Mu clearly didn't want him to hear. He could only stand far away. The heavenly eye was only a magical use of mana. After Li Qing used the method Li Mu taught her, she looked at Li Mu. She saw that his body was flashing red, gray, and white. She asked in surprise, You've condensed the sparrow Yin? Li Mu nodded and said, I just condensed it last night. Li Qing looked again at the 2 corpses on the ground. As expected, not only were their 3 spiritual souls gone, even their 7 spirits were gone. Her expression became serious and she said, This is not a simple case of a demon harming a human. Let's have someone carry the corpses back to the yamen. Chapter 71. In the Yangqiu County Government. Zhang County magistrates were not in the government office today. Constable Zhou paced around and said, It's normal for the 3 souls to dissipate after death, but there must be something strange about the 7 souls dissipating so quickly. Is there such a possibility? Hanja thought for a moment and said, The monster first killed the father and son, and then someone took their 7 souls. Constable Zhou shook his head and said, Although we can't rule out such a possibility, I think it's more likely that the deaths of these 2 people were man-made. As for the wounds on their bodies, they were done later to mislead us into thinking that they were killed by the monster. This is a common method of heretical cultivation. Hanja looked at him and asked, Constable Zhou, do you suspect that it was done by heretical cultivation? Constable Zhou nodded and said, Have you tried to find their souls? Li Qing said, I have, but the immortal guiding talisman didn't respond. If it was really done by heretical cultivation, I'm afraid that their souls have been refined, and the traces of their existence have completely disappeared. Constable Zhou frowned and said, He's in the light, and we're in the dark. Unless he makes a move next time, we can't grasp his movements at all. This case is troublesome, not necessarily. A voice came from the door. Old Wang leaned against the door frame and said, A person's soul doesn't dissipate so quickly. Even if it has been refined, it can still be sensed by the Fulu after a short time. However, at this time, we can't use the ordinary Fulu. Constable Zhou asked doubtfully, Then what kind of Fulu should we use? Old Wang shook his head and said, I don't know. I seem to have seen it in a book, but I can't remember which one. Old Wang was indeed a living fossil in the government office. After more than 2 hours of rummaging through the bookshelves in his duty room, he actually found an obscure Taoist book. The nameless Fulu was recorded in this obscure Taoist book. Unlike the immortal guiding talisman, this Fulu didn't need a living soul to guide it. As long as there was a trace of the deceased soul, the Fulu would be able to sense it. Of course, the prerequisite was that the trace of soul was within the Fulu's sensing range. In addition, the Fulu was a mid-level Fulu, and it required cultivation above the realm to complete the talisman. Constable Zhou looked at Li Qing and said, In the government office, only you and Lord Zhang are at the 3rd realm. Lord Zhang isn't here, so I'll have to trouble Miss Qing with the talisman. Hanja looked at the Fulu and frowned. The Fulu's talisman is too complicated. Without a few days of effort, it's impossible to learn it. By that time, their remaining soul would have dissipated long ago. Li Qing didn't say much. She nodded and said, Take a few strands of their hair and prepare the talisman materials. I'll try. Hanja and Constable Zhou didn't have much hope. Only Li Mu had full confidence in Li Qing. The more complex the Fulu's talisman was, the harder it was to inscribe. Due to the need to imbue the talisman with transcendence energy, the difficulty of completing the talisman would increase exponentially. However, with the heart-calming mantra, this level of Fulu was nothing at all. Li Qing carefully studied the Fulu's talisman. After a while, she put down the book. She picked up the brush and dipped it in cinnabar. She closed her eyes for a moment and slowly opened them. Li Mu saw the tip of the brush dancing on the talisman paper like flowing water. In a flash, a fulu was formed in Li Qing's hands. Li Qing put down the brush and said, "It's done." "So fast? You succeeded?" Constable Zhou's face was full of disbelief. Han Zhi even opened his eyes wide. As a disciple of the Fulu school, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to draw the Fulu just now. How could someone succeed in one try? He pursed his lips and looked at Li Qing and asked, "Miss Qing, have you learned this Fulu before?" Li Qing didn't explain too much. She drew another Fulu with no name. She folded the two Fulu into the shape of a paper crane and threw it into the air. The two paper cranes floated in the air and danced above everyone's heads. Seeing that the paper cranes didn't have any intention of leaving, Constable Zhou sighed and shook his head, saying, "It seems," before his voice fell, the two paper cranes drew an arc and suddenly flew out of the county office. "It really works." A trace of joy appeared on Constable Zhou's face. He said, "You guys follow it quickly." Constable Zhou stayed in the county office. Li Mu, Li Qing, and Han Zhi followed the paper cranes out of the county office. Generally speaking, those who took people's souls for cultivation were heretical cultivation in the soul refining or soul condensing realm. Only cultivators in these two realms had such a great desire for other people's souls and boldness. Although the souls of mortals were also useful for high-level cultivators, except for those with pure yang or pure yin physiques like Li Mu or Lu Hanyan, ordinary souls needed to reach a large number to be helpful to their cultivation. Those who chose ordinary people alone were generally not very strong. The paper cranes flew out of the county office and traveled through the county at an extremely fast speed. The paper cranes didn't have life and naturally didn't have spiritual intelligence. They only knew how to fly in a straight line in the air. If Li Mu's light body technique hadn't reached a small success and could walk on the roof, he might not have been able to keep up with Li Qing and Han Zhi's footsteps. The paper cranes flew for a quarter of an hour and then disappeared into a courtyard with a tall gate. Li Mu landed in front of the courtyard. He looked up and saw the plaque in front of the gate with the words, "Ren Mansion," written in gold. Great Zhou's laws stipulated that officials couldn't easily break into private residences. Han Zhi went forward and knocked on the door. Very quickly, a servant of the Ren Mansion poked his head out and said impatiently, "What are you doing?" Han Zhi looked at him coldly and said, "We suspect that your mansion is harboring important criminals. Immediately open the door for a search." When the servant saw that the people outside were officials, he hurriedly ran back. Han Zhi pushed the door open and entered. Li Qing and Li Mu followed behind him and walked out. Just as they entered the Ren residence, someone ran out from the back of the residence and said in a panic, "My lord, I was in the wrong the previous time. But you have beaten me and punished me. My 4C's bookstore has even closed down. Why are you still here?" Li Mu was also a little surprised to see the shopkeeper of the 4C's bookstore. "Shopkeeper Ren." Han Zhi obviously recognized him and asked, "Is this your home?" "It's this commoner's residence." Shopkeeper Ren nodded his head repeatedly and asked with a bitter face, "My lords, what is the matter this time? This commoner has been obediently staying at home these days and hasn't even left the house." Li Qing looked ahead and said, "Inside. A serious criminal escaped here. Wait for us to search first." Han Zhi said to Shopkeeper Ren and strode inside. "A serious criminal?" When Shopkeeper Ren heard this, his expression changed and he immediately said, "My lord, you must search carefully. Don't miss anything." In the deepest part of the Ren mansion, in front of a single courtyard, the courtyard door was tightly shut. Two paper cranes were fluttering in front of the courtyard door. Li Qing waved her hand and the two paper cranes flew back into her sleeve. Han Zhi stood at the courtyard door and asked, "Who lives here?" Shopkeeper Ren said honestly, "It's my son. He just became the disciple of an immortal master a few days ago and has been cultivating at home. The criminal shouldn't have run here." Han Zhi walked forward and said, "Let's go in and take a look." Creak! The courtyard door was pushed open from the inside and a young man walked out of the courtyard. The young man had a handsome face and fair skin. He held a black cat in his arms and stood at the courtyard door. He looked at Li Mu and the other two and asked, "My lords, is there anything I can help you with?" The next moment, two paper cranes flew out from Li Qing's sleeve and kept circling above the young man's head. Fu Lu had a reaction, which meant that this young man was the heretical cultivation who refined the souls of the two victims. Hanja pulled out his knife and said angrily, "So it's you." The young man's expression changed for the first time. He threw down the black cat in his arms and retreated into the courtyard. The courtyard door was suddenly closed. "Be careful." When Hanja was about to chase after him, Li Mu reminded him and kicked Hanja's butt. Hanja staggered and fell to the side. Meow. A black shadow flashed in front of his eyes. Hanja only felt pain on his face. He reached out and touched his face. A few bloody marks immediately appeared on his fingers. After the black cat was thrown to the ground by the young man, it suddenly bounced up. If not for Li Mu's kick, Hanja's eyes would have been scratched out. The black cat's claws missed and it turned to attack Li Mu. A sword light flashed in front of Li Mu's eyes. The black cat screamed and its body was cut into two pieces. The two pieces of the cat's body fell to the ground. Li Qing simply put away her sword. The three of them walked into the courtyard. The young man stood in the middle of the courtyard and made a hand seal. Li Mu suddenly blacked out and couldn't see anything. "Array!" The next moment, he heard Hanja's exclamation. His eyes couldn't see anything, and he couldn't tell the direction. He only felt that the surroundings were filled with ghostly aura and danger lurked everywhere. Li Mu didn't feel safe at all. He couldn't care less. After silently reciting the Heart Sutra, he saw light in front of him. Li Qing had seen this scene before, so she wasn't surprised. Buddha's light. Hanja was stunned at first. Then he looked at Li Mu in surprise and asked happily, "You became a monk?" Chapter 72. When did you become a monk? Which temple did you go to? Why didn't you shave your head? When did you shave your head? Are monks not allowed to marry? When Hanja saw the Buddhist light emanating from Li Mu's body, his face lit up with excitement as he asked a series of questions. "You're thinking about the peach." At this time, Hanja was still concerned about whether he became a monk or not. Li Mu was too lazy to explain. The golden light on his body became even brighter, completely illuminating a small area around the three of them. Beyond the golden light, there was still darkness. Hanja asked curiously, "What peach?" Seeing Li Mu ignoring him, he said, "This is a formation. Everyone is connected by holding hands. Stay where you are and don't move around casually. If you get separated, you may not be able to meet again." Hanja explained and then extended his hand to Li Qing. Li Mu took the opportunity to hold Hanja's hand and gave his hand to Li Qing. This way, Hanja was on the left, Li Qing was on the right, and Li Mu was in the middle, holding two people. Hanja glared at him but didn't say anything. He took out a talisman and threw it into the air. Li Mu raised his head and saw that in the darkness outside the golden light, lightning flashed and crackled. Countless lightning bolts exploded and formed a lightning net. Lightning magic is a powerful magic that only cultivators in the middle realm can come into contact with. However, the Fugu school's specialty is to use the talisman to release magic that is far beyond the cultivator's current level. However, Hanja's lightning magic released through the talisman was not as powerful as his confrontation formula. After the lightning net exploded, Li Mu heard a muffled groan from outside the formation. Even the surrounding darkness became thinner, but the formation was still not broken. Formations are also an important branch of Taoism's magic. The Spirit Array sect and the Fugu school are both part of the 6 Taoism sects. Whether it is the talisman or the formation, it is a way for cultivators to use external forces to increase their own strength. A powerful talisman or formation can easily bridge the gap between realms. Just like a child, under normal circumstances, could not defeat an adult. However, if the adult was unarmed and the child had an AK in his hand, the outcome of the battle would be different. Normal formations rely on auxiliary items such as formation flags. It is very simple to trap an enemy with a higher cultivation than oneself. It even need not be controlled from the outside. Hanja's thunder charm didn't have much effect. Li Qing closed her eyes for a moment and then opened them again. She pointed in a certain direction and said, "The eye of the formation is there. Attack together." Li Mu loosened his grip, held Bai, and channeled his mana. The long saber in Hanja's hand also began to flicker with white light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 3 rays of sword light attacked the direction Li Qing pointed at the same time. Crack. Li Mu heard the sound of porcelain shattering. The next moment, the darkness in front of him suddenly disappeared. The 3 of them reappeared in the middle of the courtyard. At the corner of the wall, a piece of jade was broken into several pieces. At the same time, a figure jumped over the courtyard wall and quickly fled into the distance. Li Qing flew up the courtyard wall and said to Hanja, "We can't fight in the city. Don't chase him too closely. Let him leave the county first, in case he does something desperate and endangers the people." Understood. Hanja nodded, and his figure also leaped up. Li Qing and Hanja went after the young man, while Li Mu stayed where he was. The young man's cultivation was higher than his, and his speed was extremely fast. It was impossible for Li Mu to catch up with him as he ran for his life. Shopkeeper Ren walked in with a blank face and muttered, What happened?" Li Mu stayed behind to understand the situation. He looked at Shopkeeper Ren and asked, "When did your son start cultivating?" Shopkeeper Ren seemed to have realized something at this moment. He said with a trembling voice, Two months ago." Li Mu frowned and asked, "He has never cultivated before?" Shopkeeper Ren shook his head with a pale face. No. The feeling that the young man gave Li Mu was that he wasn't much weaker than Li Qing. In just 2 months, he had gone from an ordinary person to the 3rd level. No matter how talented he was, it was impossible for him to achieve such a feat unless he had been taking shortcuts in the first 2 realms of spirit refining and spirit consolidating. The fastest shortcut in these 2 realms was to steal other people's souls to cultivate. In recent months, there had not been a large number of murders in Yangqiu County. However, it was certain that for this person to cultivate to such a realm, many people must have died in his hands. In 2 months, with the help of Li Qing and Yu Hanyun, Li Mu tried his best to condense 3 souls. This was already considered an extremely fast cultivation speed. As for Shopkeeper Ren's son, even if he had a large amount of soul power and courage, it was impossible for him to break through 2 realms in 3 months. There must be someone guiding him from behind. Li Mu looked at Shopkeeper Ren and asked in a deep voice, "This case is very important. How did he start cultivating? Tell me in detail." Shopkeeper Ren swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said nervously, "One day 2 months ago, Yuan went out to play and met an immortal master. He said that the immortal master said that he had a wood elemental body and was very talented in cultivation. He asked Yuan if he was willing to cultivate with him. Yuan agreed at that time. After that, Yuan came home and told me that I felt that cultivation was not a bad thing. So I agreed." Shopkeeper Ren looked at Li Mu in panic and asked, My lord, what happened?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "Your son killed many innocent people for his own cultivation." "That's impossible." Shopkeeper Ren trembled and hurriedly said, "My lord, you must be mistaken. He has been timid since he was young. He didn't even dare to kill a chicken. How could he kill people? A timid person would not treat a cat demon in the embryonic transformation realm as a pet. He would also not set up a formation and flee after seeing Li Mu and the other 2. People would change, especially after they started cultivating. As their strength increased, their mentality would also undergo a huge change. Especially when he tried to cultivate with the souls of living people, he would completely become a heretical cultivation cultivator. He would view human lives as grass and human souls as tools for his cultivation, and according to Li Mu's guess, that so-called immortal master did not have the intention of taking in Ren Yuan as a disciple. To be able to allow Ren Yuan to cultivate in such a way and rapidly increase his strength, it meant that this person was most likely also a heretical cultivation cultivator. When a heretical cultivation cultivator encountered a wood elemental body, he would definitely not think of taking in a disciple. Although the 5 elemental body was not as rare as the pure yang and purine bodies, it still had a very special use for heretical cultivation cultivators. Li Mu had read in books that many heretical cultivation cultivators would use the 5 elemental body as a cauldron to guide their cultivation. In an extremely short period of time, they would rapidly increase their cultivation. After that, they would devour their souls or primordial spirits to break through their own realms. Li Mu looked at shopkeeper Ren again and asked, "Where is Ren Yuan's master?" Shopkeeper Ren shook his head and said, "He comes and goes without a trace. He only comes to our residence occasionally to guide Yuan in his cultivation. He has not appeared for more than a month. Usually, he can only find us, but we can't find him." He swallowed his saliva and asked Li Mu, "My lord, is there a problem with that immortal master?" Li Mu said coldly, "The immortal master is fake. The demon is real. He didn't take your son as a disciple out of good intentions." "That can't be." Shopkeeper Ren's face was filled with doubt. He said, "That immortal master is really capable. I have seen it with my own eyes. He can walk on water and sit on fire, ride the wind, and even spit out flames from his mouth. He disappeared under my nose, walk on water and sit on fire, ride the wind?" Li Mu's body trembled. He suddenly looked at shopkeeper Ren and asked, "What did you say?" Walk on water, sit on fire, ride the wind, spit out flames, invisibility. These were all techniques that only transcendent cultivators could learn. He thought that the heretical cultivation cultivator was at most in the spirit condensation realm. He did not expect that he had already entered the middle realm. Li Qing was only in the 3rd realm of the spirit condensation realm, and Hanja was in the soul condensation realm. No matter what, they were no match for a middle realm cultivator. Chapter 73. Shopkeeper Ren was shocked by Li Mu. He nodded his head in a daze and said, "Not only me. When the immortal master demonstrated these supernatural powers, many servants were also there. If you don't believe me, you can ask them." Li Mu didn't have time to confirm. He picked up the paper crane on the ground and disappeared on the spot. He chased after Li Qing and Hanja. Ren Yuan had a supernatural realm master who had already entered the middle 3 realms. He was a master who could practice dozens of high-level supernatural powers. Even if they didn't meet Ren Yuan's master, Ren Yuan wouldn't be able to handle some of the things a cultivator in the middle 3 realms casually gave him. He had to remind them to be careful, outside Yangqiu County, in the wilderness. After running for a long time, Ren Yuan stopped. He turned around and looked at Li Qing and Hanja who were chasing after him. He said coldly, "How long do you plan to chase me?" Hanja breathed heavily. He bent down and pointed at him. He said loudly, "Everyone has the right to kill evil spirits and demons. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, you won't be able to escape." Ren Yuan's face darkened. He secretly crushed a jade stone in his hand. A white light flew out from the jade stone and disappeared into the distance in an instant. After doing this, he took out a black flag and threw it into the air. The flag exploded into a cloud of black fog and shrouded Hanja and Li Qing. It instantly enveloped the 2 of them. Hanja's hands formed a seal and he quickly chanted, "Wind comes out of Gen Horn, earthly soldier deployment, Sun Fang's road ahead, evil ferocious wind, urgent as the law command." A gust of wind suddenly appeared beside him. However, the black fog wasn't like ordinary fog. The wind made their clothes flutter, but it couldn't blow away the black fog. Hanja was helpless. He could only throw out another guiding thunder talisman. Lightning flashed in the black fog. This fog was obviously of the Yin attribute. Under the lightning, it kept rolling and shrinking until it completely disappeared. Ren Yuan touched his bosom and threw out 2 more command flags. They turned into black fog and enveloped the 2 people once again. "He's stalling for time." In the black fog, Li Qing said in a low voice, "Although this person is in the assembled god stage, he doesn't seem to know much about Tao. Let's not waste any more time." Lightning flashed within the black fog once again, and Han's angry roars could be heard from time to time. A moment later, the black fog dispersed, revealing Han sitting cross-legged with black fog swirling around his face. Ren Yuan's complexion changed. He reached his hand into his bosom, but didn't take out the command flag. Li Qing looked at Ren Yuan and slowly walked towards him. Suddenly, she stopped and her pupils shrank. A figure shrouded in a black robe appeared out of nowhere and stood quietly behind Ren Yuan. The black-robed man stood there quietly. His black robe tightly wrapped around his entire body, and his face was hidden under a cloud of black fog. His body did not emit any aura, but she felt an extreme sense of danger. Another one! Han just stood up. The black fog on his face had disappeared. He looked at the black-robed man from afar and shouted, "Who are you?" "Master." Looking back at the black-robed man, Ren Yuan was excited. He pointed at Li Qing and Hanja and said, "Kill them." "I want to devour their souls." Hanja held his sword and sneered, "Then let's see if you have the ability." Li Mu followed the paper crane and ran all the way. Soon, they left the county and came to a wilderness outside the city. Ren Yuan's body still had soul power that had not been refined. By following the paper crane, they could find Ren Yuan and Li Qing. Li Mu saw Ren Yuan at a glance. He seemed to be injured and was meditating on the ground. Li Qing and Hanja were fighting with a figure shrouded in a black robe. Although it was called a battle, it was more like a game. Under Li Qing and Hanja's all-out attacks, the black-robed man only dodged. The swords in their hands could not even touch the corner of his clothes. Hanja retreated to the side, panting. After a short exchange, he already knew that they were far from being a match for this person. A trace of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. He crossed his fingers and formed a hand seal. After doing all this, the magic power in his body was exhausted, and he collapsed to the ground. The power of heaven and earth fluctuated, and the image of an old man appeared in front of Hanja. The old man had white hair and a white beard. He wore a loose Taoist robe. After forming a sword seal with one hand, he waved his hand at the black-robed man, and an invisible sword chi slashed out. Clang! The black-robed man crossed his arms and resisted the invisible sword chi. His body retreated more than 10 feet before stopping. His sleeves were torn apart, and a faint blood stain appeared on his withered arms, which were exposed to the air, but it quickly disappeared. The black-robed man stood where he was and said in a hoarse voice, "The Fulu School's foundation is indeed deep. This Abhijna has already touched the edge of Taoist techniques." Hanja's expression was ugly. His heart had already sunk. This Abhijna was his strongest killing move. It was enough to kill a third-realm demonic ghost. However, the heretical cultivation in front of him had already reached the fourth realm. The gap in magic power could not be bridged even by Taoist techniques. Seeing that Hanja's Abhijna had no effect, Li Qing made a prompt decision. She grabbed Hanja's clothes by the back of his neck and retreated in an instant. When she reached Li Mu's side, she threw him a divine travel talisman and said quickly, "Let's go." Li Mu did not hesitate to stick the divine travel talisman on his body. At the same time, he raised his magic power to the limit and quickly fled in the direction they had come from with Li Qing. If it was a soul condensation or spirit condensation heretical cultivation, Li Mu could catch him off guard and give him a taste of thunder. However, the other's cultivation had already reached the middle realm. There was no other way but to run. Under normal circumstances, even if these heretical cultivation cultivators were full of evil, they would not easily kill cultivators of the Yamen. Whether it was the sects behind them or the imperial court, they were not people that these loose cultivators could offend. Li Mu stuck the divine travel talisman on his body. As he ran, he looked back. This glance made his heart skip a beat. His heart, which had just calmed down, was raised again. He saw that the black-robed man carrying Ren Yuan was actually chasing closely behind them. His speed was even faster than when they were using the divine travel talisman. At this speed, they would probably be caught before they could run back to the city. Li Mu made a prompt decision and said in a low voice, "This won't do. Split up and run." With his back to Li Qing, he formed a seal with his hand. With a boom, a bolt of thunder fell from the sky and struck the black-robed man in front of him. Although this attack did not hit him, it did stop his body. In this short pause, the three people in front of him had already fled in two different directions. The black-robed man did not think for long and chose a direction to pursue. Li Qing felt that the black-robed man's aura had disappeared. Her expression changed. She threw down Hanzhe and said, "Go back to the yamen first." After saying this, she turned around and chased in the direction that Li Mu disappeared. Li Mu, who was running at high speed, felt the aura behind him quickly approaching. He used all of his Fa Li to increase his speed. After deciding to split up, he did not give Li Qing a chance to choose. He turned around and ran in a direction far away from the city. The black-robed man chasing after him was also within Li Mu's expectations. Even a transcendent realm heretical cultivation would not dare to be presumptuous in the city. Li Qing and the others fled into the city, but Li Mu was far away from the city. As long as this heretical cultivation was not stupid, he should know who to chase. Of course, the current Li Mu was still not a match for a transcendent realm heretical cultivation cultivator. Therefore, he chose to run in the direction of the Gulf of Clearwater. This place was not far away from the Gulf of Clearwater. Li Mu was confident that he could reach Su He before the black-robed man caught up to him. On the other side of the Gulf of Clearwater was a cliff. Ren Yuan, who was being carried by the black-robed man, looked at Li Mu, who was about to reach the bottom of the cliff, and said mockingly, "There's no road ahead. Where can you run to?" Li Mu stopped and stood by the river. Ren Yuan walked over with a cold smile. Just as he took a step, he suddenly felt his whole body turn cold. A cold wind blew from the ground. Unknowingly, a white fog appeared on the surface of the water in front of him. The fog spread very quickly and soon covered a radius of several hundred feet. It was impossible to see anything within a 3-meter radius. Su He's figure appeared beside Li Mu. She looked in the direction of the black-robed man and asked, "What's going on?" "We ran into a transcendent realm heretical cultivation cultivator. It wasn't easy for us to escape here." Li Mu explained and asked directly, "A transcendent realm cultivator. Can you beat him?" As soon as he finished speaking, Su He's figure disappeared. It was obvious that he still had a lot of energy left. This made Li Mu wonder if he was really in the divinity realm. Perhaps his cultivation was even higher. After a short exchange, Li Mu's body, which was controlled by Su He, was once again forced to retreat. Li Mu's shoulder was bleeding. He had been accidentally injured by the black-robed man's sword chi. If Su He had not retreated, his arm would have followed in Yanggua's footsteps. At the same time, Su He's voice rang out in Li Mu's mind again. Although this person's cultivation is in the divinity realm, he is definitely not a divinity cultivator. Perhaps he is only a step away from the creation realm. Or perhaps he was originally in the 5th creation realm, but his cultivation level has dropped. We cannot defeat this person. I can only do my best to protect you. Li Mu understood what Su He meant. Su He could not defeat the black-robed man, but the other party could not win either. A battle of this level could not be easily decided in a short period of time. And this black-robed man, from the start, was only defending when he fought Li Qing and Hanzhe. Later on, although he chased after Li Mu, he did not use any Taoist techniques. When he fought with Su He, he was also only defending and did not take the initiative to attack. Li Mu could not guess what this person was thinking, just like how he could not see his face under the black robe. He used his all-seeing eye with his current dermic powers. He could see that Ren Yuan was surrounded by resentment and evil aura, while the black-robed man was as calm as a pool of water. There were no ripples in the old well, but it was bottomless. Li Mu was even more shocked. The dermic powers in his body were Su He's dermic powers. Although Li Mu could not borrow all of it, it was enough to make his abilities infinitely close to the 4th realm. Even so, he could not see through this black-robed man. Li Mu was suddenly stunned. The dermic powers that he could use now were no weaker than the third realm of the congregate realm. If Su-He let go of her dermic powers and let Li Mu use them, wouldn't his current cultivation be at the fourth realm of the divinity realm? Wouldn't he not be much weaker than the black-robed man? A thought flashed through Li Mu's mind. He suddenly had a bold idea. His greatest flaw now was that his cultivation was too shallow and his dermic powers were insufficient. He could not use those powerful Taoist techniques. He wondered what it would be like to use Taoist techniques at the fourth realm of cultivation. Would he be able to use those Taoist techniques that he could not use because of his lack of cultivation in the past? No matter how powerful that black-robed man was, he was only at the fourth realm. When he only had the spirit-refining realm dermic powers, this black-robed man could crush him with one finger. Li Mu could only accept it. After being possessed by Su-He, he also had the cultivation of the fourth realm. If he could use Su-He's dermic powers, he would let this black-robed man know what true cruelty was. Chapter 75. In order to use Su-He's spiritual power, she had to completely let go of her mind. Li Mu did not know how to send a voice transmission to Su-He. He said directly, "Sister Su, release all your spiritual power. I will control the body." Su-He asked, "What are you trying to do?" "You will know in a while." After all, he had not tried it before. Li Mu was not very confident. He said, "If the situation is not right, you can take back control of the body." Su-He did not reply, but Li Mu felt that he had regained control of the body. At the same time, he could control the vast spiritual power in his body. He looked at the black-robed man and formed the 6-ding jade maiden seal. He said silently, "Descend." Rumble. Li Mu heard a roar. Countless bolts of lightning descended from the black-robed man's head. Most of the thunderbolts were white, but there were also a few purple thunderbolts mixed in. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed man was submerged. Dust flew everywhere on the ground, and the thunderbolts blasted out a large charred pit. Ren Yuan was sent flying by the aftermath and fainted. The lightning dissipated. At the bottom of the pit, the black-robed man stood up shakily. The black robe on his body had been reduced to strips of cloth, sticking to his body. Some parts were still burning. A ball of black fog exploded from his body, completely enveloping his body. Only then did the lightning and fire on his body gradually dissipate. Li Mu could clearly feel that after one attack, the black-robed man's aura had weakened significantly. He changed his hand's seal and said silently, "Army." Clang. The Bai sword was automatically unsheathed. It turned into a stream of light and instantly appeared above the black fog. The sword hummed and countless sword radiances intersected in the air, slashing towards the ball of black fog. With Li Mu's cultivation of the three spirits, he could only barely control the Bai sword from a distance. It was extremely slow and could not be maintained for long. However, Su-He's mana was more than 1,000 times more profound than his. At this moment, Li Mu controlled his sword with his will. He controlled his sword from a distance and streaks of sharp sword chi slashed into the black fog. The sound of metal clashing could be heard from the black fog. A moment later, the black fog dispersed, and the figure of the black-robed man appeared again. His clothes were ragged, and although he looked a little disheveled, when the sword chi slashed on his body, it only caused sparks to fly. It couldn't hurt him at all. Chi restriction. Li Mu's expression froze. He finally realized how difficult it was to deal with this black-robed man. The chi restriction technique was also a profound Taoist divine ability. After mastering it, one's physical body would be able to restrict water, fire, evil, and ghosts. If one cultivated it to a high level, they would be invulnerable to Dharma treasures. This physical divine ability was comparable to the golden body of the Buddhists. However, the chi restriction technique was the same as the body substitution technique. Even in the middle realm, it was a relatively powerful technique. It was difficult for ordinary cultivators to learn it. This little ability is still not enough. The black-robed man stood there, letting the sword chi slash at him. Although his voice was hoarse, it was quite calm. He didn't even have the intention to attack Li Mu. He just stood there quietly, as if he wanted to test what other abilities he had. 2 of the 9 syllables mantra had been used. Li Mu hadn't mastered the 3rd fighting formula yet, so he couldn't use it rashly at this moment. He looked at the black-robed man, and the spell in his hands changed again. He chanted in a low voice, "Heaven and earth are boundless. Borrow the power of the universe. The power is born from the heart, and it grows endlessly. Heavenly Lord Tai, as the law commands." When the last word was chanted, Li Mu was slightly stunned. In the past, he couldn't finish the incantation, but this time, he actually finished it successfully. At the same time, he suddenly had a mysterious feeling in his heart. Li Mu stretched out his hand and waved. The Bai sword flew back and floated above his head. Clang! After the sound of the sword, the Bai sword split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a sky full of sword shadows, neatly arranged behind Li Mu. Behind Li Mu, rows of swords flickered. Each of the swords exuded a terrifying power. This was not Li Mu's mana, but the power of heaven and earth. After Li Mu came back to his senses, he looked at the black-robed man, smiled and asked, "Is it enough? Go." He stretched out his hand, and the countless sword shadows immediately shot toward the black-robed man with a power that could destroy heaven and earth. The black-robed man was no longer as calm as before. He turned into a ray of flowing light and retreated rapidly into the distance. However, no matter how fast he couldn't be faster than the sword light. Countless sword light passed through his body, and his physical body was instantly destroyed. Just as his nascent spirit escaped, the sword shadows behind him arrived. He immediately followed in the footsteps of his physical body, turning into a ball of light and slowly dissipating. Is he dead? The battle ended in an instant. Li Mu stood where he was, lowering his head to look at his hand in a daze. The heretical cultivation of the transcendent realm that even Su he could not defeat had been killed by him just like that. For a moment, Li Mu found it hard to believe. However, the surging mana in his body told him that he was no longer that soul-refining rookie, but had the strength to kill a transcendent realm cultivator. In the next moment, Su-hee's figure walked out of Li Mu's body. Li Mu's body trembled, suddenly feeling extremely empty. Compared to now, he still preferred the feeling just now. Su-hee looked at him, her eyes filled with deep meaning. She asked, "Just how many secrets do you have?" Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and said, "I'll tell you slowly in the future." If there was anyone in this world that Li Mu could trust, she was definitely one of them. Su-hee did not pursue the matter. She looked in the direction where the black-robed man had been killed and frowned. She said, "That black-robed man was stronger than I imagined. If he was just an ordinary transcendent realm cultivator, he would have died under your first lightning strike." Li Mu asked, "Was he in the manifestation realm?" Su-hee glanced at him and said, "After the middle 3 realms, each realm is a different heaven. If he was in the manifestation realm, our souls would have been scattered long ago." She looked at the place where the black-robed man's body and soul had dissipated and said, "Now that I think about it, even if he was not in the manifestation realm, he should have been just one step away. Even if I controlled your body, I would not have been able to defeat him. If he had used his full strength, you would have died and my soul would have been scattered. This time, we were truly friends in life and death." Li Mu smiled and said, "No matter what realm he was in, he's already dead." Su-hee thought for a moment and said, "There's something else that's very strange." Li Mu asked, "What is it?" Su-hee said, "Your last strike just now, although it was powerful and could have destroyed his body in an instant, it should not have been able to destroy his soul." Although Su-hee still had doubts, they had seen with their own eyes that the black-robed man had been completely reduced to ashes under Li Mu's 10,000 sword shadows. This could not have been fake. Li Mu had other things on his mind. He looked at Su-hee and said, "Sister Su, try possessing my body again." Su-hee looked up at him and asked, "The heretical cultivation is already dead. What else do you want?" Li Mu said, "I still want to try a strike and I need to borrow your mana." Suhi did not say anything. She took a step forward and re-entered Li Mu's body. Once again, he felt the majestic mana surging in his body. Li Mu slowly closed his eyes and formed a seal with his hands. He said quietly, "Dao Kan." Just as he said these two words, Li Mu suddenly felt that his body was empty. Suhi's figure appeared in front of him again. She looked at him with a face full of fear and asked, "What kind of strike is this?" Li Mu was surprised. "What's wrong?" Suhi patted her full chest and said with lingering fear, "If you had continued reciting just now, my soul would have dispersed directly." Li Mu's expression changed slightly. Chapter 76. At the shore of the Bay of Clear Water, Li Mu carried the unconscious Ren Yuan and said to Suhi, "Why don't you come back with me? I can cook for you every day, and you don't have to be here alone." He made this suggestion not because he had any thoughts about Suhi, but because after they merged, Li Mu could not stop thinking about that powerful strength. Although Li Mu was only at the first realm, after being possessed by Suhi, who was at the fourth realm, he could unleash strength far surpassing that of a fourth realm cultivator. And Suhi, as a soul after possessing a body, could also use the spells of the righteous path that she could not use before. The two of them together could complement each other's strengths and complement each other's weaknesses. Suhi shook her head, but did not explain anything. She said, "I can't leave here. Just remember to come and see me often." Li Mu was somewhat disappointed, but he did not force her. After bidding farewell to her, he walked out of the Bay of Clear Water. After walking for a quarter of an hour, a figure flew over from the front. When Li Qing saw him, she immediately asked, "Are you all right?" Li Mu shook his head. "I'm fine." Li Qing sighed in relief, then asked, "Where's the heretical cultivation?" Li Mu threw Ren Yuan to the ground and said, "When he was chasing me, a righteous cultivator happened to pass by and killed that heretical cultivation, saving me." Li Qing looked at him and asked, "Where is that senior?" Li Mu pointed in a direction and said, "He just left." The black-robed man was killed, and Ren Yuan was also captured. Li Qing sighed in relief, but her expression turned cold. She looked at Li Mu and asked, "Who told you to act on your own just now?" Li Mu opened his mouth. Before he could think of an answer, several figures appeared behind them and quickly arrived beside them. Constable Zhou led the others and asked nervously, "What about the heretical cultivation?" "He was killed by a senior who was passing by." Li Mu pointed at Ren Yuan on the ground and said, "This person is the murderer of the hunter father and son. His cultivation has already been crippled by that senior. Within 2 months, he had consecutively crossed the soul refining and soul condensation stages. I'm afraid that the innocent people who died in his hands were not only the hunter father and son," Constable Zhou said with a sullen face. "Take him back to the Yamen first and interrogate him carefully." After arranging everything, he looked at Li Mu and asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Li Mu smiled and said, "It's all thanks to that senior." Li Mu did not intend to tell Constable Zhou the truth about Suhi, but he did not ask. The heretical cultivation did not walk the right path and defied the heavens. Everyone had the right to punish them. Although Li Mu's reason was a bit coincidental, he had to believe it. Li Mu looked into her eyes and said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "My life was saved by you, boss. My cultivation was introduced to me by you. Even the Bai sword was given to me by you. If I run away without caring about you when I'm in danger, am I still a human?" Li Qing met his gaze. Li Mu did not back down at all. Li Qing looked into Li Mu's eyes and finally looked away. She said, "In the future, without my permission, you are not allowed to act on your own. Otherwise, I won't have you as my subordinate." This meant that today's matter was over. Li Mu let out a sigh of relief and said seriously, "I will listen to the boss in the future. If the boss tells me to go east, I will not go west. If the boss tells me to beat a dog, I will not beat a chicken." Bah. Han just spat in the distance and scolded angrily, "Shameless." Li Qing went to interrogate Ren Yuan. Li Mu hummed a little tune. It seemed that women still liked to listen to good music, even fairies were no exception. He hummed a few words and suddenly felt something. He looked to the other side and found that Hanja was standing there, looking at him with disdain. Hanja looked at Li Mu in the distance and said disdainfully, "Are you still a man to bow and scrape to a woman?" If it was yesterday, Li Mu might have felt a little guilty when he heard Hanja ask this. Now he could stand there with his back straight and tell him loudly that he was a man, a real man. Li Mu smiled and said, "A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. A man who only knows how to stretch his neck forward is called a boorish man." Hanja knew that Li Mu was mocking him for almost being caught by the cat demon. He snorted and said, "Today you saved me once. In the future, I will save you once. Then we can call it even." Li Mu was too lazy to waste time with Hanja. He still had to go to the torture room and interrogate Ren Yuan about the black-robed man. Hanja stood in the corridor and said gloomily, "In terms of strength and status, which part of me is inferior to him? Why does Miss Qing treat him so well?" That female shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion also flirted with him. Old Wang poked his head out of the window and said, "Although you are stronger than him and have a higher status than him, there is one thing that you can't compare to him." Hanja turned his head to look at Old Wang and said unhappily, "What is it?" Old Wang said, "You are not as good-looking as him." Hanja snorted and said disdainfully, "Shallow." Old Wang shook his head and retracted his head. He sighed and said, "These kids nowadays, they have cultivated until they are stupid. When it comes to girls, how can they not yield and coax them a little? Do you think that by standing there in a daze, girls will throw themselves at you? Do you think you are Li Si?" Hanja returned to the torture room gloomily. He saw one of his subordinates and waved at him. The constable quickly ran over and asked, "Boss, what's the matter?" Hanja said, "I want to ask you something. Answer honestly." The constable immediately said, "Boss, please ask. I will answer honestly." Hanja touched his chin and asked, "Me or Li Mu, who is better looking?" "Li Mu?" The constable was stunned. He thought about Li Mu and then looked at Hanja. He shook his head and said, "Boss, don't joke around." Chapter 78. Pure soul power and courage were extremely attractive to cultivators. Cultivators in the soul refining and soul condensing realms could use them to quickly break through realms. High-level cultivators could also use them to strengthen their bodies, souls, and primordial spirits. Jade was a spiritual object that could be used to store soul power, courage, and even mana. It was also one of the materials for setting up formations. Li Mu still had 4 souls that had not been condensed. 2 of them were the following souls and the other 2 were the reverse souls. When refining fear and evil emotions, he needed a large amount of courage. This was also the reason why he did not reject Hanja. After a fierce battle and almost being invaded by the heart demon, Li Mu spent the entire afternoon in the duty room to adjust his breathing. He only returned when the yamen was closed. Today was another day outside. He did not know what Wanwan ate for lunch. Li Mu walked on the street. From afar he saw Wanwan sitting on the steps of the door, playing happily with a puppy. The puppy circled around her. Every time Wanwan wanted to hug it, it would quickly run away. Occasionally, people passing by would look at her with strange eyes. Li Mu guessed correctly. With this girl's personality, even if she really met a ghost, she would not think that way. This puppy was just a spiritual body. Perhaps it did not even know that it was dead. It was just the 7 souls that were naturally afraid of living people. Although it wanted to play with Wanwan, it did not dare to get close. Wanwan saw Li Mu and immediately stood up. She patted her butt and said happily, "Young master, you're back?" Li Mu asked, "Why are you here alone? Where's your young miss?" Young Miss is busy at the shop. Wan Wan looked happily at Li Mu and said, Young master, there's a puppy here. It's very fun. Where's the puppy? It just ran away. Li Mu walked to the door and said, Let's go in and cook first. We'll wait for your young miss to come back. After Lu Hanyan and Li Mu became familiar with each other, they often ate together. She didn't have any kitchen utensils at home, so she shared a set with Li Mu. If Li Mu came back early, Li Mu would cook. If Yunyan Pavilion wasn't busy, there would be a table full of steaming hot dishes by the time Li Mu came home. The two of them didn't seem to be neighbors. Instead, they seemed to be living together. After a tiring day, Li Mu planned to have a simple hot pot. Wan Wan liked barbecue and hot pot the most. She was busy preparing the ingredients. After preparing the ingredients, Lu Hanyan still hadn't returned. She probably wouldn't come back for dinner. Li Mu wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to finish the dishes. With Wan Wan around, not even a single vegetable or bean sprout would be left. Wan Wan squatted by the stove and waited for the water to boil. Li Mu walked into the study and waved at her. Wan Wan, come here. He gave the last piece of tofu to Lu Hanyan and said, I thought you two would be together forever. I'm not Wan Wan. I started saving up my dowry a few years ago. Lu Hanyan coldly snorted and said, Isn't it good to be alone? Why should I get married? How do I know if he's after my money? Lu Hanyan's words were very reasonable. If a man married her, if it wasn't for her body, then it was for her money. Because she was really too rich. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and suddenly asked, Why do you think Wan Wan and I will get married together? Li Mu couldn't tell her that it was because he had fantasized about it. He could only say, he guessed. Without waiting for Lu Hanyan to continue asking, he put down his chopsticks and said, I'm full. You can continue. Lu Hanyan looked at his back as he left and then looked at Wan Wan, who was immersed in eating. She suddenly said, Wan, how about I marry you to Li Mu in 2 years? Wan Wan choked for a moment. She patted her chest and asked in surprise, Miss, really? Lu Hanyan looked at her in surprise and asked, You don't really want to marry Li Mu, do you? Why not? Wan Wan lowered her head and said shyly, Young master can cook so much delicious food, catch ghosts, fight demons, and protect me. I'm willing to marry him. She didn't expect that her little maid would actually have such thoughts. Lu Hanyan put down her chopsticks and looked like she had nothing to live for. After Zhang County magistrates submitted the file on Ren Yuan's case, they received the county governor's verdict in less than 3 days. In order to cultivate, Ren Yuan killed innocent people and extracted their souls. This was not tolerated by the heavenly Tao, so he was sentenced to be executed immediately. Ren Yuan's fate was within Li Mu's expectations. The imperial court had almost zero tolerance for such vicious acts. They killed whoever they caught. Even the 6th realm Dongshen heretical cultivation was killed because of this, not to mention Ren Yuan, who had forcefully cultivated to the 3rd realm. On the day Ren Yuan was executed, Li Mu went to take a look. When the executioner's blade fell, besides the head falling to the ground, his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls also dissipated in an instant. Shopkeeper Ren knelt on the ground and hugged Ren Yuan's headless corpse. Tears streamed down his face as he said sorrowfully, Cultivating immortality, cultivating immortality. In the end, he lost his life cultivation. What kind of immortality is this? Li Mu sighed softly, shook his head, and left. The path of cultivation was never a smooth one. Old Wang was right. The weak were prey to the strong. This was the only law in the cultivation world. On this path, one had to fight against the heavens and oneself. If one was not careful, they would be invaded by their inner demons. One wrong step and they would be led astray, and there would be no turning back. Chapter 79. 3 of the 7 spirits had already been condensed. In the next 3 months, as long as he condensed another spirit, Li Mu would be able to avoid the danger to his life. After thinking for a long time, Li Mu still decided to condense the fourth spirit, the seizing thief. The first spirit of the seizing thief was related to the immune system. A person who lost this spirit would fall sick very easily. Li Mu had the exorcism talisman. It could replace the seizing thief and prevent illness, but it was a temporary solution. If he didn't condense the seizing thief for too long, the exorcism talisman's effect would be minimal. The seizing thief was born from fear. Li Mu had absorbed quite a bit of fear from the demonic ghosts he had encountered before, but he was still far from condensing the spirit. He had also tried to use the method of telling ghost stories to induce fear in the tea house guests. However, the final result was the same as when he tried to induce grief in the audience. He couldn't induce fear in the guests. The reason was naturally that the fear was only directed at the scenes in their minds and not at Li Mu. If he wanted to condense the seizing thief, he had to find another method. When Li Mu arrived at the county yamen, he realized that Li Qing wasn't there. Zhang Shan and one of Han's constables were gambling. Old Wang was watching from the side. Li Mu patted Zhang Shan's shoulder from behind. Zhang Shan jumped up. When he turned around and saw that it was Li Mu, he patted his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. "It's you, Li Mu. I thought it was the boss. You scared me to death." Naturally, Li Mu didn't waste all his effort in inducing Zhang Shan's fear. The attraction of emotions had to be like this, face to face, and it had to be directed at Li Mu. However, after thinking for a long time, Li Mu couldn't think of any profession that could make it convenient to scare people. Since there was nothing he could use as a reference, he might as well create one himself. A thought flashed through Li Mu's mind. He suddenly had an idea. He was about to walk out of the duty room and go back to discuss it with Lu Hanyan. When he turned around, his vision suddenly went dark. It wasn't because he was dizzy, nor was it because the sky had darkened. It was because a figure was blocking the door of the duty room, almost completely blocking the door. This person was tall and abnormally fat. Chen Miao Miao, the daughter of the county minister whom Li Mu had met before, could be considered as a little bird in front of him. Li Mu thought for a moment and remembered that this person was called Wu Bo, one of the cultivators in the county government. However, 3 months ago he was seconded to participate in the suppression of the zombie disaster in Zhou County. Today, he appeared in the government office again. "Get out of my way." However, not everyone had an invulnerable kidney like Li Si and could treat the brothel as their own home. At the very least, even if their bodies were made of iron, they could not afford to go there every day. After all, they were different from Li Si. They could not let the women in the brothel fall for them. It was precisely because there were no bars, KTVs, cinemas, bookstores, tea houses, theaters, and music halls that the business of the haunted house was so good. Li Mu should be the first person to open a haunted house here. When the time came, he could attract customers at an extremely low price or even for free. After all, he only wanted fear, not to rely on it to make money. Li Mu was not good at opening a shop, so he had to ask Lu Hanyan for help. In the Yunyan Pavilion, Lu Hanyan heard Li Mu's idea and hesitated. "Your idea is possible, but would anyone really spend money to have someone pretend to be a ghost to scare themselves? Let's try it first." After people were full and satisfied with their material needs, they liked to seek spiritual stimulation. Disneyland tickets were so expensive, but there were still people coming in waves every day. Li Mu said, "I don't know much about opening a shop, so I'll leave it to you. Deduct the expenses from my share." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "Shopkeeper Ren of the Four Seas bookstore sold the bookstore to us today. The location is not bad. If we open a shop there, business should be better." After Li Mu left, shopkeeper Huang walked up and said, "Miss, didn't you just say that you want to make the Four Seas bookstore a branch of the Yunyan Pavilion? We'll talk about it later, this is more important." Lu Hanyan sighed and muttered, "Wan, this is for your future happiness." Chapter 80. From the construction of the haunted house to the renovation, to the layout, it would take at least half a month. However, only half of the half year had passed, so Li Mu was not in a hurry. Leaving this matter to Lu Hanyan, Li Mu put more effort into his cultivation. In the soul-refining realm, he was like a child holding a large blade. Although the weapon in his hand was sharp, the child's strength was too weak. No matter how sharp the blade was, it would be a waste in his hands. His Fa Li was too weak and his cultivation was too low. These were Li Mu's biggest shortcomings. If he had Su He's cultivation, combined with various mysterious Dao techniques, even if he was not invincible in the middle realm, he would at least be able to walk unhindered in the sixth realm Dongxian and below. It was a pity that Su He was not willing to live with Li Mu. Otherwise, when he was in danger, he would only need to let Su He possess his body. In front of him, any demon ghost or heretical cultivation would have to kneel down and speak. Right now, he could only prepare as many spirit travel talismans as possible. If the situation was bad, he would run to Clearwater Bay. It had to be said that among the Dao sects, Fulu school was the most special one. In terms of alchemy, they could not compare to the Pill Cauldron sect. In terms of array formations, they were not as proficient as the Spirit Array sect. In terms of Dao techniques, they were not as good as the Southern sect, Northern sect, or Xuanzong. Fulu school's biggest advantage was that if one's cultivation was not enough, Fulu could make up for it. No one knew how many types of Fulu school had. No one knew how strong their Fulu was. When fighting with the Fulu school's disciples, it was difficult to judge their strength from the surface. A soul-refining realm cultivator holding a heaven-grade Fulu could easily kill a middle realm expert. Of course, the success rate of creating a heaven-grade Fulu was extremely low. It required an upper realm expert to try several thousand times before they could create one. This kind of Fulu was very rare even in the Fulu school. Only a few were produced in a year, and only a very small number of people had them. Exorcism talismans, soul lock talismans, and others were the lowest level of the yellow rank Fulu talismans. They could be used with a little bit of magic power. Divine travel talismans were already of the profound rank. Writing talismans required one to be at least in the soul-refining realm. This Fulu was a must-have for escaping. With Li Qing's spirit-concentrating cultivation, even ordinary transcendent realm cultivators might not be able to catch up to her. No matter what kind of danger he encountered, as long as Li Mu could reach Clearwater Bay, he would be in an invincible position. Therefore, he planned to ask for a few more from Li Qing in case he needed them. When Li Mu came to the duty room, he only saw Li Qing. He walked into the duty room and said, "Boss." Seeing Li Mu come in, Li Qing waved her hand and closed the door of the duty room. Li Mu was slightly startled and asked, "Boss, why did you close the door in the middle of the day?" Li Qing stood up and looked at him with a serious face. She asked, "Where did you get the clear heart technique that you taught me?" Li Mu saw her serious expression and asked carefully, Is this very important?" Li Qing took a deep breath and said, "I originally thought that this technique could save me the time to memorize the runes. Yesterday, when I was writing talismans, I found out that it could actually increase the success rate of writing talismans. Do you know what this means?" Li Mu was startled. "What?" Li Qing said seriously, "The higher the level of the Fulu, the harder it is to successfully write it. For a heaven-level Fulu, you can only succeed once after thousands of attempts. In the ancestral court of Fulu school, the number of heaven-level Fulu talismans produced in a year does not exceed 10. Li Mu knew what this meant. It meant that if the people of the Fulu school knew the clear heart technique, they could mass-produce heaven-level Fulu. In the cultivation world, heaven-level Fulu was like a nuclear weapon. It could only be written by powerhouses of the 7th level and above. It could seal one of their divine abilities in the Fulu. The higher the level of the Fulu, the lower the success rate. In the entire Fulu school, the number of heaven-level Fulu talismans produced every year could be counted with 2 hands. If heaven-level Fulu could be mass-produced, then when the time came, everyone in the Fulu school would have a heaven-level Fulu talisman. The soul-refining killing divine ability and the spirit-concentrating destroying Dongxian would be as simple as eating and drinking. The Fulu school would dominate the 10 continents and no one would be able to stop them, Li Qing said slowly. If this matter were to spread, it would bring a catastrophe to the Dao school. At that time, neither you nor I would be able to escape. You haven't told anyone about the clear heart technique yet? Li Mu's reaction to this was not as big as Li Qing's. The clear heart technique was not a catastrophe. If he were to spread the Buddhist incantation of 9 syllables and the Tao Te Ching, then it would be a real catastrophe for the Dao school. If he were to add the Heart Sutra, then even the Buddhist school would not be able to escape. Lu Hanyan was one of them and was trustworthy. In order not to worry Li Qing, Li Mu shook his head and said, "No. In this world, only you and I know about it." Li Mu had a strange feeling that he was hiding something from another woman in front of her. Li Qing asked doubtfully, "Then how did you get it?" Li Mu did not explain too much. He just said, "In short, boss, trust me. The clear heart technique will never be spread." Li Qing looked at him.